We're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Microwave Extravaganza podcast, episode 20, even though we already had an episode 20, because at this point I've given up on numbers. And today we are sponsored by absolutely nobody because YouTube decided that dildo was just not tight enough in that asshole. So they decided to say that we cannot be monetized by anybody. You know, I understand. Anybody who does is an enemy of the state. But regardless, my friend, my brother, not my brother. In fact, we look nothing alike, but that's not the point. Donovan Warland is right here. By the way, sponsored by Donovan Warland tonight. That is our sponsor.
Happy New Year.
He has sponsored us with all of his wait. What would you? What kind of?
Donovan's spicy hot takes.
Oh yes.
That's
Yes, that is our sponsor tonight. His spicy hot takes and his IRL vlogging. Great industry. Currently really making Logan Paul look really pathetic. Oh man, yes, and his ancient ways of kung fu, if I'm not mistaken. That about right?
Oh well, I don't know, how ancient really, but it's keeping me young. It's keeping the hair, keeping the gray hair away.
And we are also okay. So what we were just discussing is neuroplasticity. Now, a lot of people don't realize just how plastic the brain is. Now, one of the reasons why I talk about this is because I used to watch porn, and every guy, even older guys, but especially every guy who ever grew up with the internet, watched it at some point. I am no different from any other guys. So if you think this is unique to me, we know it's not. And Donovan, you know what I'm talking about, right? You know it's nothing abnormal at all.
Oh well, it's evolved. It's been what's pushed every advancement in media during my whole lifetime. Cable, VCRs, DVDs, high quality publishing. It was all pornography. They had the best paper for magazines. They had they had this unbelievable, ability to distribute DVDs and stuff. I mean, high speed internet, all that stuff. Yeah.
But so it's not abnormal. But the thing is, I've been clean for 5 years, and I heavily rail against people watching it. And the reason why is, let's think about this from a scientific thing. And I know everyone's going to be like, all right, well, when do you take out the Bible and the snakes? Well, that's not what I'm going to talk about. What I want to talk about is the fact that your brain changes because of what you watch on the internet. In fact, there are actually scientists out there who specifically make websites be designed to give constant novelty and be addicting. And they say, if we didn't do this, we would not be profitable. Even completely safe for work content does this. The thing is, your brain likes novelty more than anything else. And what's not oftentimes said is that dopamine, the neurotransmitter, is actually not the pleasure hormone. It is actually the desire hormone. Think about it like this. You don't get much dopamine when you jump out of an airplane, despite what you might think. Because your brain doesn't want you doing stupid shit, even if it makes you happy for a little bit. But you will get, once you land on the ground safely, you'll have a huge rush of happiness. You'll say, that was awesome, but I never want to do it again. There's a reason why. It's a survival thing. Your brain doesn't want you doing stupid stuff. But if you find something like chocolate cake out in the wild, which you would never do, but whatever, and your brain says, wait a minute, there's a whole supply of this, right? Remember where that chocolate cake was. Your brain will now learn to go after it. The same thing is with the internet. When you find something pleasurable and interesting, it could be anything, even music. Your brain will say, remember this. Now, after a while, it'll get tired of that. But new information, novelty, is what trains your brain to want more and more and more. And pornography is one of the most novel and yet most interesting things humans can have, especially for men. Think about it like this. Men are visually stimulated. We all know this. And thousands of years ago, you would be lucky to have even one sexual partner at best. Nowadays, you can see as many sexual partners erotically displaying themselves in front of you at the click of a mouse for free in any novel position you like. Pornography changes your brain. There have been people who have erectile dysfunction. They have severe depression. There's all sorts of problems that legitimately pornography can cause because it is a constant stream of novelty with very, very little work. And so when it comes to neuroplasticity, your brain is very moldable. When we say plasticity, we're talking about plastic. Plastic can be molded, shaped, rewired. So one of the reasons why I rail against this is because pornography does change your brain. And this is why people who say that when they stop watching porn, their desire for different sex kind of gets more tame. And when they start watching again, it starts to get less and less tame because your brain eventually gets used to the normal stuff. And eventually it just needs a little bit more. It needs a little more shock value, a little more, oh my God, a little more aggressive stuff. This is where people go from watching vanilla as hell porn to watching BDSM. So, yeah. Now, I know that seems like a weird way to start off the conversation, but I wanted to talk about this and how when it comes to behavior, changing the way your brain operates is one of the most powerful things you can do in your life. So, Donovan, have you heard about any of these studies before, though, that I've been referencing?
Well, I know that I think it was, I saw it was Molyneux did a thing about the dangers of pornography, and I know Forney, Matt Forney has talked a lot about it. Beckloff, always, he talks a lot about it there, and I know I've seen, that people are citing something. And I fundamentally got the same understanding of it from Buddhism. That a lot of people will talk about, oh, look at this Buddhist statuary and how risque it is, and this and that. And the idea was that it was like, oh, well, no, it's that there were all kinds of risque things that were risque for nothing more than being novel sexual positions. This image is actually the idea of any pleasure you have has the cost of, and then they would go into the nature of pleasure, where that pleasure is really more a distraction that's within your mind. It's not real outside of your sensual experience. And the reason why they had to do this was they had to discourage hedonism as a school of spiritual enlightenment, which is the left-hand path.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and the left-hand path is about order through chaos, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct about that?
Well, that's like one of the. I mean, that it's weird because people bring that one up. That I'm like, oh, I guess all I know is that it always has to do with sensual pleasure as a key to some form of spiritual enlightenment.
Is that what you think that is with like all these like porn star where it's going and like it's about self-expression and finding my passion and being myself and exploring my inner you?
Oh, bingo! You just used the terms self and inner me, inner self. That's the modernist term. It came directly out of psychotherapy, and it's
personal truth is one I always laugh about.
Yeah. That's actually, so what literally they've done is they took the word soul, and now they're talking about inner me, inner self. Then personal truth, it actually has to do with knowledge of God. It's a replacement for knowledge of God because God is truth. So they replaced it with that. Mm-hmm. That I have my personal truth. So it's like that makes them like the left-hand path. They are an entity apart from the order of God.
Yeah, that's and that's kind of why it's Luciferian. Now, I'll just quickly show this little clip.
Inspired by the last talker, I'm going to have a little song about internet porn. No, just kidding. The widespread use of internet porn is one of the fastest moving, most global experiments ever unconsciously conducted. Nearly every young guy with an internet access becomes an eager test subject. Canadian researcher Simon Lajeunesse found that most boys seek by age 10, driven by a brain that is...
I think I was like 11, by the way. Like, and when you're that young and you're just starting to go through hormones and you're a dumb kid with your very small prefrontal cortex that's very much undeveloped, what do you expect?
Suddenly fascinated by sex. Now, users perceive internet porn as far more compelling than porn of the past. Why is that? Unending novelty. In this Australian experiment, it's not mere nudity, but novelty that gets arousal skyrocketing. Subjects watch 22 porn displays. See that spike? That's where the researchers switched to porn the guys hadn't seen before. What happened? Their erections and their brains fired up. Why all the excitement? Mother Nature likes to keep a male fertilizing willing females as long as any new ones are around. In that top line, the ram, he needs more and more time to mate with the same old you. But if you keep switching females, the bottom line, well, it's just not the same. He can get the job done in 2 minutes flat and keep going until he is utterly exhausted. This is known as the Coolidge effect. Without the Coolidge effect, there would be no internet porn. This old mammalian program, the Coolidge effect, proceeds...
By the way, when you hear the term mammalian, it just refers to the general mammal part of our brain. Remember, we started off as just reptilian-like creatures that had spines. Then we went into a specific order of mammal, and then human, which is oftentimes the nickname for the prefrontal cortex of our brain, is the specific part that separates us from chimps. Just want to let people know that.
Each novel female on a guy's screen as a genetic opportunity. To keep a guy fertilizing the screen, his brain releases the go-get-it neurochemical dopamine for each novel mate or image. Eventually, the ram will tire, but as long as the guy can keep clicking, he can keep going, and so will his dopamine. With internet porn, a guy can see more hot babes in 10 minutes than his ancestors could see in several lifetimes. The problem is he has a hunter-gatherer brain. A heavy user's brain rewires itself to this genetic bonanza, so his brain becomes associated with this porn harem. Such behaviors that are associated with this are being alone, voyeurism, clicking, searching, multiple tabs, fast forwarding, constant novelty, shock, and surprise. As one young guy once asked, are we the first generation to masturbate left-handed? Real
well done.
Is courtship, touching, being touched, smells, pheromones, emotional connection, interaction with a real person. Now, what happens when our guy finally gets with a real mate? Well, researchers don't know much about the effects of internet porn for several reasons. In 2009, when Lajeunesse tried to study porn's impact, he couldn't find any college-age males who weren't using it. So the first serious is that studies have no control groups. Now, this is a huge blind spot. Imagine if all guys...
It didn't at first. That's where the no-fap movement came around. See, everyone always says no-fap is so ridiculous, but no, it's not.
No, and
the very real problem. And by the way, let me explain something about dopamine. Every hormone you have is an emotion. When you're hungry, that's ghrelin. When you're full, that's leptin. When you are sad, that's a form of norepinephrine, although it does calm you down. When you're extremely happy, that's serotonin. I may get those norepinephrine and serotonin a little bit wrong. Testosterone, human growth hormone, that's for brain activity and building muscle. All these different things, even like lactic acid is I believe that's for soreness. You can only produce so much dopamine all the time. What your brain does is when all of a sudden you've been watching porn for so long, your brain eventually sees that it has the highest dopamine yield of everything else you're doing, but it can't keep making that, so it down-regulates your nerves and your dopamine receptors become less sensitive, and eventually it goes after the one thing that gives the highest novelty and dopamine yields. Everything else becomes less interesting. So people who say that NoFap is BS don't know what they're talking about.
Well, and also to say this is something that comes up in the training for like the quote unquote internal styles of Kung Fu. Yoga, it's the same thing. That during a time of intense training, was it the Zen? Oh, it's I'm forgetting, but it's 100 days of Zen training, if I remember, 70 days or 100, and it's a type of training program, and a key to it is no ejaculation, and that's like a big thing in the idea of building up internal energy is the way that it's viewed as, and especially the orthodox schools that are more Buddhist like, they're just like, just don't mess with your, just don't fap, bro. The Taoist schools are the ones that you'll find more of the, you could have sexy yoga with your woman, but don't ejaculate. It's, and then you build up the super secret power, and stuff. And then and there's totally schools of that thinking that they call it a lot of times. Anybody who's watching this, they call it a lot of times white tantra in the United States. It's a great way of getting the herpes.
Okay, I get what you mean. Yeah. Now, I just want to close this part on that, and I want to show you something about gut bacteria. But I'll talk about that in a little bit. But here's the thing. Like I said, your brain is actually legitimately changed by pornography. Well, guess what? The same thing can happen with totally safe for work contents from the internet. Because in the past, if you wanted something, if you wanted music, you had to go down to the music store or whatever. Music's probably the least harmful of it all because people have a certain taste, usually. And music can also, be very passive. So it's not really too bad. But even if you're like, on Twitter a lot, the constant novelty and the fact that you will get rewards somewhat randomly, like there'll be a formula that isn't always followed, will always get you more addicted because you get really excited by the fact that while you can't completely predict something, it's fun to know that if you keep scrolling, you might eventually get something exciting. The fact that
cat meme,
not a complete, what's up?
Cat meme.
Yeah, exactly. Cat meme. Oh, got a cat meme. Okay, 3 up. Ooh, yes, it's a new article about Syria. Okay. And
dog with a gun.
Another one. There's another article. Okay, 5 up. Nope. 6, 7. Oh, something from my favorite podcaster. The fact that it has only a certain amount of predictability makes it just random and just exciting enough where your mind is like a hamster in a wheel, and you just need more. And it's not good for your brain. This is actually why I started taking Tim Ferriss's advice. He doesn't start working until after 12. At least not working. Sorry, he actually does work right away in the morning. But then he doesn't do anything with the internet for fun until I think about 12 in the afternoon. And the rest of the day is done physical stuff. Because he knows once you get into that, the internet is an ADHD-inducing machine. And it's done that by design. Like I said, these companies, Apple, Google, Facebook, Instagram, MySpace, although nobody gives a shit about MySpace, they would not be profitable if they could not make you want to refresh the page again and again and again and again and again. That is how they get their money. So this is all by design. And so high-speed internet is so much different compared to anything else we've ever had. You can look at newspapers, you can look at books, you can look at all this shit. Nothing is more addicting than the internet highway. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I found that because I had gotten a chance to take programming classes like when I was a kid, like I was terrible at it. I mean, it was very simple, like Logos or something to draw things with a turtle. But the thing was, I knew, command prompt, knew how the command language worked. You had to do that there was no interface really with early computers. So in searching on the internet, I just thought, well, if you put the information in the search bar like the old days, that's how you'll find stuff. And people who are much younger than me, who were much more familiar with the interfaces, would just be astounded. How did you find that? I'm like, I put in these words, and they're like, what? And I couldn't, it took me years to actually think it through. Like, wait, why do I think that you got to put the words in like that? And I was like, oh, yeah, in the old days, that's how you had to find everything, in various ways, or that's how it worked, And so I love messing with the internet, such that I actually have identified coming away from the internet, closing the computer down, as coming out of a dive. I've actually given it the language of sci-fi, that it's like when I get into the internet, it's diving time. and it's just because I know I'm putting my brain through an experience, and that it's actually, it can be I mean, it exhausts the brain. You actually, like, I drink caffeine. I have to stand up and exercise while I'm doing stuff, so that I could keep my brain, keep all the electricity working right in my body, but it's I totally, oh my God, I fear for the day where goggles become really useful. That's just going to be fucking hell.
What I've noticed is I absorb information intensively better than extensively. So nowadays, what I do is once a week, that's when I get all my news. 4 hours. Tim Pool, Washington Post, essentially anything I want. Tuesdays, when after I go out of a movie, that's when I'll go ahead and mess around on Twitter and do stupid stuff. So if someone like Lauren Southern or Tommy Robinson or I don't know, DJ Watts or Conor McGregor tweets something, that's when I mess around with that. But what I've noticed is that you absorb way less information when you were constantly hitting with novelty, because you are in a very passive, go with the flow moments, and you don't have any concentration. And you tend to forget almost everything you watch because there's no need immediately. But when you focus only a little bit, and this is actually how I make a lot of my political views, only a little bit on what really matters, you actually get a lot more out of it in a shorter period of time, because it just makes more sense. You have a very short amount of time you can absorb this information, and you don't get distracted as easily. You still there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So what I do is oftentimes, like, people will go from emotion to emotion about politicians and not really have a clear idea of what they actually are like, because they constantly listen to the news every day. They wake up, new story, new way of looking at the same thing, cycle. What I do is I let it build up over a few days. And if it's a particular politician, I might even wait a month. I just see, okay, what have they done? And because I don't have an emotional attachment to it, I can be like, oh, this week they did this, that, and that. And I look at it all within like sometimes 2 to 4 hours of being online. And I don't have to worry about being emotionally manipulated because I can only look at it for so long before it can make me feel a certain way. And I can compare, they did this back in this time and this and this and that. And that will give you a much better view of the world.
Yeah, I gotta admit, there's sometimes where there'll be a story, everything that has happened about Trump and any kind of tax issues. I'm like, okay, let's give this 2 days. I just don't even mess with it. And every time, 2 days later, it turns out there wasn't shit to it. It's bunko, it's double bunko, or it's illegal that the person even had the documents, but that kind of stuff, yeah. And so I gotta admit that recently, because the left has become so that way is again just cray. Let's give this 2 days to see what happens. Like Stormy Daniels is totally one that I'm sure
you're breaking up a little bit. You're a little fuzzy.
You guys are going to, I don't know, some woman in her happen. I'm sure he's going to just feel so much shame, oh, the dishonor, and then he'll leave the seat of greatest power and success that everybody in the world wishes to have. I'm sorry, this woman's tits are just not that good looking. I'm sorry, you guys, you're gonna have to swing way harder next time, because this is not making it out of the fucking park. You guys have fouled into the seats super hard, and now she owes him money.
I love that so much. You know what's interesting? And here's the thing. I don't really watch secular talk very often. I don't really like Kyle Kalinske very much. But I sometimes...
Oh, that's who that is. Okay.
But when I watch... But every once in a while, I do force myself to watch the opposite side, because I think the only way you can really be educated is to understand your enemy just as much as... Well, not even enemy. Just political disagreeer, I guess you could say. Enemy is too combative. But the only way you can understand someone you disagree with is to really watch them. So sometimes I do force myself to watch him, and it's not as bad as people say. It's not cancer, instant cancer, or whatever. Okay, but he said something so interesting. I'm like, he is so right about this. I disagree with him about healthcare for all, because that's ridiculous to me, and that that taxes should continue to go up to give free college. Nothing is free. Okay, nothing is free. And the people who are going to college right now are such dirtbags that cheat all the time. You want it to be expensive, so that way the people who do get in there have some kind of respect for where they are at, or whatever. But he nailed this on the head. He said that the reason why the Democrats keep talking about Stormy Daniels and all sorts of other stuff, he said, personally with Trump, I don't care so much about Stormy Daniels. Do I think it's inappropriate? Sure. But that would be the least important issue on my bucket list. Out of all the other things, that is the least important. It's annoying, and it's gross, and it's disrespectful, but that's it. An old man had sex with a porn star who he paid. The woman had the right to say no. She didn't. I don't care. What I care about is health care for all. What I care about is, reviving the job markets. What I care about is pulling out of wars we don't need to be in. All the left talking points. But I'm like, oh my God, he's right. And then he said this. He said the reason why the Democrats are going after Trump about this is because a lot of the stuff that would be legitimate to go after him for are things they do. They're corporate. They are corporate Democrats. So a lot of the issues they talk about, that they would go after him for are things that not only have they not delivered on themselves, but they have done the exact opposite of, what their constituents would say. And they just don't want to get kicked out of office. So, throw all the stones you want from your glass house. I'm like, that's right. That is right. That's 100% correct. Think about it. Hillary Clinton was having lunch with Goldman Sachs while talking about being for the little guy. They stole the seat from Bernie Sanders. What are you going to criticize Trump about that he can't just flip right back at you?
Well, I would say even a great example of where exactly he's coming from, and a great mega fail of the Democratic Party. Say the Democratic Party could present to younger voters, look at Trump is going to get us in a horrible war. And so they present the evidence. Look, here he is, friendly with a bad guy, and this friendliness with this bad guy is going to equal war, and so they tried this. But the problem is they can't get this belief that Vladimir Putin is going to unleash warfare all over the United States, when it seems like Vladimir Putin has ninja mega cyber hackers everywhere and hot redheads infiltrating the elections everywhere at all times, and that they are hacking Facebook, they're hacking Google, they're hacking Hillary Clinton. They just hack all the time. How is it that Donald Trump can actually have anything to do with this? Because Putin seems to be brainiac. And so they're presenting the stuff that it takes this unbelievable leap of faith to believe, when they're obviously in cahoots with all of these the neocons and the reshaping of the Middle East, and that it's so obvious on its face that Democrats widely had to go for Bernie Sanders, because they're like, well, he says he's against war. They had no evidence of that, but they went with it because they were like, he seems the least like a guy I associate with going to war. And that's it. They had no idea that Bernie Sanders totally was down for anything Obama wanted to do with a drone.
Yeah, and he was a huge supporter of the F-35 program, which
and that too, yeah.
Which still hasn't produced a single plane that actually flies.
Oh, yeah, I was wondering. I hadn't checked up on it. That's the joke. You check up to see if they produced a plane. That's so wrong. I shouldn't even. Oh, God. See, that's the Gen X in me. Just laughing my ass off. Hey, look at how we're burning money. Just watch it burn.
Now, let's get back to neuroplasticity, but it is pretty funny laughing at these people. One of the things I learned about is that your gut health also impacts your brain a lot. This is why I regularly drink kombucha. It doesn't taste the greatest. It's not terrible. I love the lemonade stuff. That's actually pretty good. But the healthy gut microbiome is actually really important. They've actually started thinking that it might be linked to autism. Not even kidding.
Interesting.
And there's all sorts of other things we could say about neuroplasticity, but the one thing that helps more and more is to understand how the brain works. The thing is, this is something not a whole lot of people talk about, is that, you can definitely predict what large groups of people do based on perhaps a lot of their genetics. But that's more of what they will do, because most people aren't into putting an effort into changing the way their brain behaves. But there have been people, let me show you a little example from a guy who I hope anyone watching will subscribe to this guy. He has a lot of very good a lot of good videos. A lot of good videos about this stuff. He's very, very intelligent, and I love his content. He's a self-improvement kind of guy. What I've learned is what his name is. Let me just show you just how much neuroplasticity can help you in your own life.
In the midst of being charged at by 20 masked men armed with rifles and explosives, Sally Adi was able to calmly and smoothly shoot down all of her attackers one by one. Sally didn't entirely grasp what had happened. From her perspective, the 20-minute skirmish lasted only a few moments, and when it was over, she asked, "How many did I get?" Not realizing she had successfully taken down all 20 men. This was very impressive, considering Sally is not a sniper but a journalist, and this was only the second time she had been in a situation like this. After all, this took place in a battlefield simulator in a training facility for snipers. In Sally's first run on the simulator, she panicked, was overwhelmed by how many enemies there were, and jammed her rifle several times. What made the difference was that in the second run, she had a transcranial direct current stimulator strapped to her head. This is basically a helmet that runs an electrical current through your brain with the aim of enhancing cognitive performance. In a February 2012 issue of New Scientist, Sally described being hooked up to the brain helmet as a near-spiritual experience. She said that the thing that made the earth drop out from under my feet was that for the first time in my life, everything in my head finally shut up. There was suddenly this incredible silence in my head. The purpose of the transcranial stimulator was actually to shortcut the subject into achieving an elusive mental state known as flow, a term popularized by Hungarian psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. It's a state of effortless concentration, optimal performance, and as Mihaly puts it, it's the state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. And it usually occurs when a person's body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. This is something that may be experienced by an athlete during a competition, a musician trying to nail a difficult piece, or even someone working on a project, trying to meet a deadline with only hours to spare. In his book titled Flow, Mihaly describes how skilled people like artists, chess masters, and even surgeons, who, when sufficiently challenged, will literally lose themselves in the activity. Like Sally Adi, all data irrelevant to the task at hand, including the sense of self and the chatter in the head that comes with it, cease to exist. Unfortunately for us, the brain's default mode of operation is pretty much the opposite of this incredible state of high focus and high performance. fMRI studies have found that there is a set of brain regions known as the task negative network, or the default mode network, that are active whenever you aren't focused on anything in particular. This study is showing that the regions associated with the default mode network negatively correlate with task-positive brain regions. Essentially, when you aren't focused on anything, there will be increased activity in the default mode network and less activity in the task-positive regions. And the opposite is true when you are paying attention to something. The areas of the brain that belong to the default mode network are responsible for self-referencing, understanding other people's emotions, remembering the past, imagining the future, and general mind-wandering. If you've seen the TV show Westworld, you may be familiar with the concept of the bicameral mind. This idea, presented in Julian James's 1976 book, The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, says that until as recently as 3,000 years ago, humans were simple automatons acting out the will of the gods, which was delivered to them via a voice in their heads. This isn't entirely different from how modern humans operate. Even people not afflicted by mental illness will acknowledge that they have a voice in their heads, but it's not from the gods, it's their own voice saying, "This shirt makes me look fat. I wonder if I'll ever get promoted. I bet my boss likes Jerry better than me. And I can't believe that thing that was bad happened to me." The default mode network seems to be what is responsible for this annoying inner narrator. This narrator is known in some Eastern traditions as the monkey mind. It's just what it sounds, an annoying, repetitive stream of information about yourself, how other people are thinking about you, and ruminations about the past and worries about the future. In the case of Sally D, her monkey mind finally shut up when she put on the transcranial cap and went into the flow state. Maybe unsurprisingly, the default mode network is great at specifically preventing flow. In a 2016 paper headed by Martin.
Now, I just want to stop it there. The reason why I wanted to show you that is because I want you to kind of understand what his solution is. Now, if you look at the title, it says, Why Meditate? Change your brain's default mode. Meditation, for those who don't know, is sitting in a relatively calm area for an extended period of time. And in this time, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to breathe deeply and be present in the moment. What do I mean by that? I mean you focus on things like such as the feeling of the weight of your feet on the floor, your own breath. You're supposed to focus very, very intensely on a particular sense that is going on in that moment. Nothing else, not about the future, not about the past. And every once in a while, obviously don't try too hard. Don't hurt yourself, and actually take it very slow and easy when you do it. Every time you lose concentration, just generally say, oh, I was supposed to focus on this, and reroute your brain back to whatever you're supposed to be focusing on, whether it's your breath or whatever. The point of this is to essentially do a bicep curl for your brain. Your brain needs this kind of activity. It teaches you how to stay focused on something more often. You make more of what's called alpha brain waves when you do this. Alpha gets you into flow like that. And the more you can make at will, by the way, not just in general, because it's better to do it at will than in general, the more you can actually be calmer in your regular life. People who meditate on a regular basis tend to be less emotional and tend to have more emotional intelligence when something goes bad. So when something goes bad, they usually come up with a very logical and intelligent response rather than acting emotionally. They oftentimes are able to get things done in much shorter periods of time and with better quality. They can sleep better, their cortisol levels go down, so they have less of a risk of cancer and heart disease. Eventually, the benefits of meditation start to sound like one of those ads that said, try this out. Doctors hate them. Find out how. Starts to sound like one of those advertisements. But the benefits of meditation are enormous. And remember, it's all based on how you treat this, your brain. There are many other things I could talk about when it comes to that, but that's not the only topic I wanted to talk about tonight. But just remember, neuroplasticity is probably one of the greatest advantages you could ever have. There are people who worry about their gut bacteria, who use how habits work to route them out of bad habits and into good ones, who meditate, and who do all sorts of things for their brain, who have gone from the least productive people in their lives to the best ones. I do want to get Donovan's opinion in a little bit. But first, I want to say one thing before we do that and then move on to the second thing we want to talk about tonight. One of the things I've learned is that I don't take an entire day to do anything anymore. I don't take an entire day to work on any projects or any business that I work on nowadays anymore. I don't do that because I realize 1 hour, maximum 2, is all you really need. Working intensively, working really, really hard, even for just 2 hours, and then doing whatever the rest of you want for the rest of the day, I don't know, making widgets if that's what you like, is far more productive than waiting or doing it all in one day. The reason why is because there's something called Parkinson's Law. What it means is that work expands to fill all the time needed for its completion. So if I give you a day, you'll probably procrastinate a little bit, but you'll probably get it done. If I give you an hour, you will throw away everything that doesn't matter. Close Facebook, Instagram, close out every window that has nothing to do with whatever you need, and just focus on what really matters. If I give you a week, oh dear God, If I give you a month, I don't even know if by the end of the deadline you will actually have anything done. Work intensively. Your brain is a limited resource. Do not waste your energy on things that don't matter. Do not think that being busy with meaningless stuff, even if you're good at that meaningless stuff, somehow makes it less meaningless. If something is dumb and useless, it's still dumb and useless no matter how good you are at it. Put more time locks on what you do and work intensively instead of extensively. All right, Donovan, so what do you think about what I've been talking about so far?
Meditation was a big focus of my 20s because I wanted to understand what the deal was with martial arts, and I knew Zen had something to do with it. So I got way into that and I actually did attended a kind of a group of Tibetan Buddhist meditation class, and in learning some Taoist martial arts, learned Taoist meditation. And so there's a book I highly recommend to people actually on the foundational language and what science knows about this that's actually very readable, called Sleeping, Dreaming, and Dying. And if you search for that title with the name Dalai Lama, it's that basically the Dalai Lama attends this conference with all these scientists, and they talk about what is cognition and what is then sleeping, what is dreaming, and what is death, because this baffles the cognition almost in every single system, no matter if it's neurology or if it's Tibetan Buddhism. So it was kind of a fun read because you got to understand how sharp the Dalai Lama is, having all this translated at speed, and he would stop the conversation to ask for clarification on very specific terms from a field of science. And it was very interesting because people I've watched stuff about him, and so you could see, no matter what you think of the guy's morals and history, you could see the effect that system of meditation has on his cognition. That he could really, he really is hearing everything. He's seeing it all around him. He's not distracted in any way. The West had terms for this once, and our term for it was disinterestedness. That you were basically pulling your, fundamentally in the Aristotelian kind of Christian terms, you were pulling your will away from an object. You no longer had your imagination working on objects around you. You simply were accepting the world as it is, and and taming then the vices. The vices are linked to the senses, and in taming the vices, you tame the root of the distractions that the senses provide.
Yeah.
You find this a lot, especially not only in Buddhism, but you find it a lot in Taoism as well. Taoism really gets into this in the most ancient way that we've seen, where they link organs, sense organs, and states of mind all together. And it's not necessarily wrong. There's stuff that actually, a lot of it actually does make sense. It correlates with science to this day. It's just that we just don't think of it. We don't think, we just don't think of it that. But it's that whatever system people choose. My teacher put it as, all meditation is, whether you're doing Tai Chi Chuan or whether you're doing Zazen, or some scientific method, you're concentrating on only one thing. So there's no imagination involved. You're actually trying to tame the imagination and the fantasy world as we associate the social justice warriors living in. Their emotions are making them crazy, so they live in a fantasy world.
They do.
and they have fantasy hair colors, and they dress in fantasy clothes, and they want
They dress in tons of anime.
yeah, you know, and fantasy, they want fantasy jobs, but and it's the taming of sort of, and it's the hard part because we also still want to stay creative. And I think this is the part that gets missed by a lot of people. I realized at a certain point, good thinkers don't think hard. They think soft. At some point, they let that default mode turn on. Masamune Shiro talks about it in the mangas of Appleseed and especially in Ghost in the Shell as autistic mode, that you let everything settle in your mind and you let your mind sort through it on its own and you don't think about it. And eventually it just pours out. The result just comes out. It's somehow your brain was working on it. And it's a leap of faith in yourself. But once that you get better at it, you start to realize actually that's how your brain is made. And that speech actually showed, like, no, that this is what your brain is doing. You know, like, this is the part that's activated. And so in Taoist meditation, the parts that he was showing of the brain, that's totally what you meditate on for, like, the really high-level brain meditations.
Yeah. By the way, I just wanted to show you guys something. Let's see. I wanted to show you this clip because this is what your mind can do if you start changing it. Now, this is from the movie Limitless, and one of the thing, and obviously it's a fictional movie, but you know, where a guy essentially gets like access to every ounce of his mind, and how it allows him to do more than he ever has done before. Obviously, he takes a pill called NCT48. Now, obviously, there is no actual NCT48, although there are nootropics, believe it or not. There are some really amazing make you smarter drugs out there, and they're not like Adderall, Ritalin, Vyvanse, or Focalin, or any of that stimulus crap. I mean, they legitimately do fire parts of your brain, but that's neither here nor there. Now, this is kind of a dramatization of what can happen, but it really does kind of work like this after you rewired your brain to work better. And I'm not saying I'm a super genius. I'm not. Just want to let people know that right now. All I'm saying is there's you right now, and then there's the better enhanced you.
Listening to her rag, if I were tripping, I'd jump out a fucking window.
Hello? Are you listening to me? Do you get it? You are going to be out on the street.
And then I felt it. I was blind, but now I see. You don't like me, and I don't blame you. You see a self-defeating, energy-sucking piece of shit who's sponging off your husband. You're wishing I'd blown my brains out, but my existence shouldn't make you this upset. What is it?
That's none of your business.
Something wrong in law school?
You know, I'm in law school.
People who aren't usually don't carry around dry, academically constipated books about a dead Supreme Court justice.
You're a creep, aren't you? You've been following me.
No, I just noticed the book.
Just saw the corner of it. How did you know that?
I'd seen it before, 12 years ago in college. Sitting on the couch of a TA I was trying to make, waiting for her to come back out of the bathroom, hoping she'd have a condom. Somehow my unconscious had served that up. A memory I'd never even recorded, or was it there the whole time, and all I needed was the access.
If you're writing a paper, that's not the book I'd use.
Who asked you?
Hastings has his oral history. I'd start there. Interesting point. Grammatically, this guy was an idiot, which sort of gives credence to the theory that one of the clerks he had fired actually wrote most of this guy's major opinions. You Google the clerk's sons, they'd love to talk to you, exonerate their dad. That'd give you something that no one else has.
Information from the Odd Museum show, a half-read article, some PBS documentary. It was all bubbling up in my frontal lobes, mixing itself together into a sparkling cocktail of useful information. She didn't have a chance.
What are your suggestions?
We'd really worked on her paper, too. In 45 minutes, it was a polished gem. She was pleased.
Now, of course, remember, guys, not sure how far it will go with women, although I'm sure it will help. But but you will become a lot more successful in everything you want to do. Well, 90% of what we can do and what we can't do is not in our bodies; it's in our minds. Now, Donovan, you want to give some closing thoughts about that topic? Because there's only two others I want to hit tonight.
No, that kind of nailed it. I gotta admit, I've totally, all those little details I watch for all the time. You know, it's all about like what kind of lapel pin a guy in a suit has on. It's all about like what book is this person reading, and you just let it sink in. You know, as the longer and longer you get used to letting things just sink in and letting your mind do what it's supposed to do. As long as you regularly go through the workout of decompressing your mind and going autistic mode, sort of in the form of meditation, it starts to do it on its own. It's just, yes, like that guy said, you just needed the access.
Yes. And by the way, I actually have legitimate autism, and I always felt like, why do I have this? It makes me weird, socially awkward. And I had to literally train myself to be socially powerful. And I actually have a lot of friends. I've had a few girlfriends in the past. It really doesn't get in the way of anything anymore. But now I kind of see that what it was is that survivally. A word. Okay, so for survival reasons, why would someone have autism? Why would someone have this that makes them a little socially awkward? Well, what about all the conventions that we have nowadays that we didn't have back then? Autism might not have been that as much of a big deal. If you had the symptoms of autism back then, and you would have laser focus and extreme interest in one particular subject or another, that would probably give you a survival advantage in the primitive world. So going back in my genealogy, I'm wondering if perhaps autism was almost an evolutionary advantage that started to be phased out and started to become less and less necessary and became more of a hindrance.
Well, also keep in mind, we no longer discuss, and we're not allowed to discuss, we talk about the autistic spectrum or scale. Well, we never talk about what is this scale they're talking about, because there's another far end, and that is extreme emotionality. Like that, to the point where they say the person is hysteric. You know, that they're in fact their emotional states and their senses sway them constantly, and in ways that are dangerous. You know, eventually dangerous to themselves. But we're no longer allowed to discuss that one because of the groups that it tends to demographically affect.
Yeah, Jews tend to have more of that because of accidental inbreeding. And I hear nothing coming from Donovan because he's just
Well,
like,
you know, I have heard something of this. Yes, I have heard something like this before.
I will take the blunts of all the blame, by the way. Leave Donovan alone.
Histrionics are, I mean, like, it is a standard part of Jewish humor about the family. So, yeah.
So, yes, I will take the blunt of that. Donovan was being a good guy.
But, I mean, but you actually made a great point in that. Let's take a look at then. We think of various like, say, the British Anglo-Saxons, so specifically those of the royal classes, being far more of such a disinterested state that they're actually absolutely cruel and heartless, but they follow orders. And remember, being a part of the nobility and commanding the armed forces. Well, that's who commanded the armed forces, was the nobility. You didn't have to be good at it. It was, and so yeah, you're right. It probably helped in, say, that case. That's like one of those environments that would possibly be a far more likely bred in, or more likely, condition of somebody, that they just seem a little. They're socially awkward, but they don't have to be, chuddy, all like chummy with people. They're noble. They talk to only who's important and about the important things.
Yeah, they take out empathy. They take out the empathy in a battle, in a war, because when you think about it, what that? I hear echo.
I keep hearing a little bit of an echo too, and I'm trying to figure out, because I have headphones on.
That's so weird. But think about this. Imagine you are a war general. You have to accept the fact that people are going to die. So if you're not that empathetic, and you actually take it from a very disturbingly scientific view, how do we win? Oh, well, this very extremely cruel and disturbing technique is very, very effective. All right, have the men do that. You could be talking about, well, if you go into the trenches at night and only stab every other guy to death and then run away, and make sure you do it quietly enough where they don't know until they wake up, you cause psychological warfare. That is probably, by the way, extremely disturbing to talk about, extremely unempathetic and disturbing, and it's also effective. You can say what you want about how disturbing it is. It will work. So what kind of person do you have to have that will be willing to tell the soldiers that? Probably someone who's a little bit socially awkward, because they have to think, well, how do we win? Not how do we live with ourselves, but how do we win? You know what I mean?
Yeah. The psychic traits that are necessary for the environment are that, that's it. That's what's necessary for the environment, and that's what people will breed for. Or that's what will survive. People will breed along directions that that will adapt to the situation, and so that's where you get like certain kinds of personalities of whole peoples that neighboring peoples will point out about them, and so yeah, it's just one of those things that, like, we at this time know about human behavior, and we're so directed toward high IQ skills. We have such a small percentage of people who are in the armed forces or in the constabulary and stuff that we just are not really, we can't even handle this idea that there might be there's legions of people who still, like, they could take a machete and go to work on people and go home and eat dinner, and it's just, and that's just terrifying, utterly terrifying, to people, most Americans, they'd be like, what? Nobody would do that. And you'd be like, no, really? I'm telling you, did you see the news today about Zimbabwe? You know, it's like, you know, did you hear about what happened in El Salvador the other day? You know, it's like,
and that's the thing. That's what people don't want to talk about. And they always think, well, why are they killing people? Well, maybe because you can have morality without the feeling of fear of breaking it. You might obey your morality because you know you just want to be someone you can respect. And you want, and you know, maybe you were brought up right, but you're not afraid, and you're not nervous about it. It's not emotionally traumatizing for you to rip someone apart. It's just you just choose not to do it. So just don't piss off that guy. You know, the guy who always seems to be so quiet, which is always an interesting little trait you see. Like, you know, don't piss off that guy.
Well, I mean, say for an example, anybody in your audience who is familiar with, you grew up around Filipinos that they come across on, you know, like if you watch the news and you've met a Filipino once or twice, you know, if you're Gen X or a boomer, you know, you're like, oh, those pleasant Filipino people, they're so nice, they're so sunny. If you grew up around them, you know, yeah, well, don't go fucking around with them because they don't play around. They'll whip your ass. You know, you'll end up with a gun in your face. You know, they do not play, and they're into honor. They have these aspects of their culture, and so when people now are seeing Duterte, they don't. To me, Duterte is my friend's dad. You know, like don't fuck with my country. You know, I mean, it's just, you know, are you on the drugs? You know, I mean, it's just the guy. I know this guy. He has those sandals with the X, you know, X shape to the top of them. You know, and you know, this guy doesn't play around. And you know about Filipino dad. If you know about Filipino dad, and talking to people, I'm like, have you never met Filipinos? But then I think about that. I'm like, wait, why does that seem like a normal response to me? And then I have to think about it because that is my understanding of their psychic traits. You know, that there is a point at which dad will whip everybody's ass if he needs to get order under the house.
Listen, I whoop everybody's ass tonight. If you guys not come the fuck down.
Yeah, totally. You know, it's just, you know, this guy take my fucking parking space. You know, and you know, I'm going to fucking kill him. You know, it's a dad. No, you know, just
cleaver out. Dad's got the cleaver out. Everyone, shut up.
You know, yeah, and it's like, oh, Dad, I'll just leave him. You know, your wife leaves a note. You know, it's like I've known this guy. You know, they're awesome. It's like one of those people. I'm like, thank goodness there's guys like this because and yeah, and you know, and so I don't know. Like that's my upbringing. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like, yeah, that is really interesting. I mean, like how, like, you know, look at nowadays. You have police everywhere. Everyone wants to go to the third party, solve all their problems. And, you know, like, you know, the biggest, you know, thing you see from people nowadays is, you know, if you don't shut the hell up, I am going to absolutely destroy you on Twitter. Oh, well, here's my Filipino friend. Why don't you talk to him about that? He's a fun guy. Just he has 5 children.
Notice that the American press just doesn't want to talk about old Duterte. Like, just don't even give him press. Don't know. He, you know, because that fool, like, if you protest and he doesn't really like what you're saying, yeah, he'll send in the police. Literally, in. The vehicles will be at full speed. They will go into your protest. They will then stop once there are bodies everywhere, and then they will grab the bodies and throw them in the trucks. And I'm just like, holy shit, dude. I was like, but I mean, now of course I would not want that. This is the United States, you know, but it's like I get it. I get why he got elected. You know, obviously they've got problems that I can't even imagine. So,
well, and that's the thing. People don't want to admit this. You know, whether he's morally justified in what he does, he is anything but effective. He is effective. You know, and that's the thing. People over there, they kind of like the feeling of a guy who has just said, enough with the whole do it politely.
yeah.
What needs to get done? You know, I don't care if I have to take off my suit. You know, it's like how the EU is always trying to screw country after country over, and EU member states are always screwing each other over. But they do it in suits, and they do it very slowly, and it takes forever with bills and stuff like that. Duterte is just like, fuck that. Let's get some shit done. You know, and, you know, I don't agree with his tactics, but he gets shit done. He's one of those people that said, okay, enough with being polite. Enough with saying, oh, hi, Susan, who literally stabbed me in the back the other day. How are you? Let's go have a little talk about today's budget. No. He's like, do we have enough trucks today? Do we have enough bullets? Okay, let's balance this budget. Here we go. And I think it's that autistic lack of empathy and intense focus of what works that makes people say, let's reelect him. Voluntarily, by the way.
Totally. That of course is utterly horrifying to, you know, all the big-brained people. You know, why would you ever elect somebody who's so mean and terrible? You know, and it's just like, you know, yeah, they yeah.
Duterte's got his shotgun and his friend's got his machine gun. Well, I think they'll understand what the budget is going to be this week. Oh, there he goes. He's opening the zoos again. And apparently, if those who smuggle drugs will be thrown into the lake. It looks like everyone's going to get an A on their test today in English class.
Well, I gotta admit, like one in a larger puzzle piece kind of thing for the listeners, that it does look like a big advantage to this. This is tough to kind of think about. Duterte has to be also dealing with the worldwide web of heroin, opioids, and this, you know, and stuff like fentanyl coming out of China and all that. That the quote unquote gangs / jihadis that are in the southern islands that are Muslim, Mindanao, I believe, is the main island. That is the Muslim, you know, part of the ethnicity. That they are one. I could tell you this: from the left in the 90s, there began to be a big concentration on that group as a group that is a victimized minority. They have become more and more sort of popular in among Filipino and Pacific Islander student organizations as a group that should be concentrated on, similar to the Palestinians. The war on terrorism went after them a bit, but Duterte, I believe, is a big part of what Duterte is a big part of is actually going after these lines, these rat lines of drugs. And that the jihadis, gangsters, types of Mindanao, the Muslim gangster types and jihadis, they're fundamentally probably getting it. You know, they're one of the waypoints for a lot of drugs, probably, and they don't care as long as it leaves the island, it leaves their space, and goes to somebody else's space, and they get their money, they get their Kalashnikovs, they get, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah, and also triads are probably a huge part of that too. No,
and then there's probably to some degree, you know, like elements of that in the Chinese diaspora that you know are either like then it might be that they're a part of it simply for the protection. Like if you're the Chinese of Singapore, oh yeah, you'll deal with the finance. You know, all these financial transactions. Well, you see, in this country, we have very, very strict rules on not asking our clients any questions, especially if they are from the United States and might be the CIA. We do not fucking ask questions, because if the wind blows the wrong way in this country, the Muslims will kill us all. You know, it's like, so please do not cause us problems. You know,
the United States would. Oh, you want to go bomb some other country that has a quote unquote terrorist that never really seems to do much. Well, I'll just, I'll sign some documents, and I don't know, perhaps we just don't notice how much napalm you're bringing into the country. Those Muslims, they seem to be a little angry. You'll protect us? Oh, well, that's just lovely. Oh, you need to smuggle some you need to take out this dictator? Well, I would not know anything about that. I mean, with all those guns you're supplying us with, I would know nothing about that dictator you took out in that country that you once funded. No. We'll just look this way, sir. Thank you very much. Right?
Yeah, because Singapore is a major funding hub. It's like there's every place that has its appropriate duty or appropriate industry that you can funnel money, use influence, do different things. When it comes to an organization, this whatever the CIA is, whatever these various intelligence networks are that want to shape the future, that's they just use the right place for the right purpose.
Yeah. Anyway,
it's efficiency. Yeah. What was the other thing you want to talk about?
So there's two things. The last one I want to talk about is Russia, and how, yes, the left has Russia derangement syndrome, but I think the right now has Russia fetishization syndrome, where they stop seeing the flaws that are very deep in Putin, like to the point where they kind of ignore some of the bad parts. But I wanted to talk about Mother. And it's a movie we talked about, I told you about a while back. So here it is. Here's an analysis of it, and just showing how satanic it really is.
Darren Aronofsky's Mother is one of those films that I knew walking out of it would be one of those films that would cause division among moviegoers. But it has surprisingly caused more division than I thought. I originally thought walking out of it that critics would love this film and audiences would hate it. But it turns out that critics are also divided on this film as well. Some critics have deemed Darren Aronofsky's film as masturbatory and pretentious, while other critics are deeming it as a cinematic masterpiece. I personally love it when filmmakers like Darren Aronofsky are not afraid to go through with their artistic vision and take those ballsy risks in order to create the product that they want to make. That is just something that I highly appreciate in film. And my favorite kind of films are the ones that leave you constantly thinking and allow your imagination to run wild for quite some time after you've already seen the film. And Darren Aronofsky's Mother achieved just that. So in this video, I'm going to attempt to interpret and explain all of the metaphors and allegories that are woven throughout this film. So to make this clear, this is just my personal interpretation of the film that I believe makes the most consistent sense. And this should be obvious, but this video is only for those who have actually seen the film. If you have not seen the film and you do not want this spoiled for you, please check out my spoiler-free video for Mother. The link will be in the description box below. So let's just dive straight into it. You've probably already heard this in different analysis videos and also during the press for this film. But yes, this film is filled with biblical allusions. Every single character in this film represents either a character or a story from the Bible. Javier Bardem's character represents the biblical God. He just has to be some kind of supernatural God, because there is absolutely no way that a human being can survive an explosion headfirst like that without a scratch on them. Javier Bardem's wife, played by Jennifer Lawrence, is supposed to represent Mother Nature or Mother Earth. Michelle Pfeiffer and Ed Harris are supposed to represent Adam and Eve. And their sons, played by the Gleason brothers, are obviously supposed to represent the Cain and Abel story. That one seemed more obvious to me, and I think most people will be able to see that one. So let's go back to Javier Bardem's character and why he represents the biblical God. Well, just like the biblical God, Javier Bardem's character is obsessed with being worshipped by people. Throughout this entire film, he is such a selfish person who only cares about himself and what other people think about him. And he has this incredible, unnerving, and unhealthy obsession to be worshipped by other people. Even though his wife, Mother Earth, gives him so much love, it's just not enough for him. The only reason that the biblical God created the earth is so that it can house humans and that it can lay a foundation so that humans can thrive.
Oh, okay. There we go.
So to the biblical
Ding, ding, ding.
earth isn't what's special. What's special?
Error number 1, theologically, thus twisting everything into a horrible Persian Gnostic.
People forget that Earth is just a physical creation of God. It's not a third. It's not Mother Nature. It's not its own thing. It's literally just material.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're trying to make it look like he's like he's allowing the Earth to be destroyed by humans because because he's selfish. But the Earth is literally just Earth, plants and shit. He never created it in a sacred way. Sure, the Garden of Eden was a sacred home for humans. That's what it was. It was an environment. Also, the idea that he doesn't care. That's always interesting.
Earth. Which again is why throughout the entire film, Javier Bardem's character is not fazed at all by all of the people that are invading his privacy and coming into his home. Because that's what he made it for. He didn't make the earth just so the earth can be earth and just be there. He made the earth so that way humans can come and live in it and do whatever they please in it. He is only willing to give kindness and give forgiveness to those who worship him and praise him. The only reason why Javier Bardem allowed Michelle Pfeiffer and Ed Harris to stay in the house for so long, even after they literally broke his most sacred stone, is because he still wants their company because they are constantly worshiping him. Instead of just kicking them out and settling it that way, he would rather just board up his private room and allow them to stay in the house just so he can continue to have people in his house that admire him and praise him. Even more obviously in the third act of the film where we get that insanely intense and graphic scene where the
This makes so much sense to people who have bad families.
Yeah.
This must make... I mean, because when... the only reason people really have very large houses for their multiple children actually is so that you can live there and be comfortable. And so from a time where McMansions came into existence and now the children who grew up in them are watching this movie in a theater in their 20-somethings, maybe early 30-somethings, that's supposed to be what's being sold to them. Dad just wanted me in that house so that I would stay there and follow his damn rules. Well, that fucking air conditioning, and it's, yeah, I don't know. Most people I know at some generation had hella family members in one house if they could fit them. I remember this clearly, and it's only a generation away, and so it's, yeah, just stuff like this. It just so hits me that I'm like, no, there are really cultures like Italians were like this into living memory. They would have hella family members living on one plot of land in an urban area because they could build an in-law, or somebody would buy the place next door to them, and they all grew up around each other and in each other's houses. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, this next part is really, really important.
Insanely intense house. Just so obviously in the third act of the film where we get that insanely intense and graphic scene where the baby is getting pulled away by a mob of people as his neck breaks, as the baby gets chopped up into bits and sacrificed and eaten, which is also something very biblical that happens numerous times throughout the Bible. It could also just be a cult representation of how Christians look like when they do the practice of eating the body of Christ.
And of course, another misrepresentation of Christianity.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. That was magnificent.
Yeah. First off, Jesus never was a child when that happened. Helpless. He said, take this wine and this bread. It is a representation of my body and my blood. In other words, it's symbolic. It was never literal. And he told people to do this. But in the movie, here, hold on, let me just show you. What the scene looks like. And don't worry, it's censored enough where it's not too horrible.
How popular was this movie?
Decently popular. It definitely made its money back and more at the box office. It was popular enough where it got critical acclaim, and what was I gonna say? I think it was it definitely made twice itself back. So this is the scene. It's definitely unnerving as hell. His shock value. There you go. Okay, sorry.
Was she like dreaming this?
No, this is literally happens in the movie. She wasn't dreaming it. No, she wasn't dreaming this at all. I'm not even kidding. It's like that messed up.
So it was like everything always this surreal throughout the entire movie?
It's kind of meant to be that way because it's kind of meant to a certain degree, it definitely builds up more and more surreal as it goes on. But right away from the beginning, the movie starts off where the house that they're in, there are no roads to it. And literally Jennifer Lawrence's body coalesces at the beginning of the movie in a bed. Like out of nowhere. Like she like
Okay. Got it. Okay. So this is literally like some kind of freak's nightmare about twisted biblical stories with like all sorts of Moloch shit in it. And, yeah.
The idea was that even though it's very literal and it's not like all of a sudden some dude wakes up and says, "Holy shit, that was a weird dream." It's supposed to be kind of like subtly hinting at the idea that that this is more mystical, right? And not so much down to earth, and that.
Oh yeah. I mean, no. Actually, I would in fact say this reminds me. There's a group of Gnostic people. They say they're Gnostics or something like that.
Hold on.
That they have.
Do you mind if I show first? Do you mind if I show the scene first?
Oh, sure thing.
Okay.
He's not dead. The voice still cries out to be heard. Loud and strong. Listen. Can you hear that?
Now let's pause for that's already pretty intense and dark as it is, but he's clearly dressed up like a priest. They're all eating, and yet at an altar that looks very heavily Roman Catholic. I mean,
Oh yeah. Let's just go back to the other thing.
yeah. So you were saying about the whole Gnostic thing?
Well, this reminds me of the idea of the inverted tree of life, or the inverted tree of knowledge of good and evil. That it's like there's the tree of the knowledge of good, which would be like the 10 Sephiroth, and then there's this the kind of the tree of the underworld, the tree of evil, and so there's some schools of Kabbalism that became a major focus. So you get a lot of all those names, kooky names of demons in medieval magic and stuff that people are into in secret societies, and so this kind of thing makes me think of like what they take is they take that which would be blessings and the sacred and invert it.
Yeah.
And that's like a key part of the uglifying of beauty in art.
Yeah, it's to invert things because this way, whatever they want can be whatever they say. When you don't have standards, anything someone tells you could be true, right?
Yeah, and that's a key part of like they'll warp the fundamental concepts of the Christian tradition. They so that and then it's just it's kind of interesting when somebody does something along these lines that it's so obvious that they're like, I had this weird way of thinking about the Bible story that's super fucked up, and I have a budget, and yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and is it any surprising that Darren Aronofsky is a secular Jew?
Like, at least with something like The Matrix, where it has some allegories and stuff, it's like exciting to watch.
Oh yeah.
Where you're like, whoa, what are they gonna? Whoa, look, they're fighting, but he jumped up on the ceiling because he's a computer program. Whoa, what the hell?
They're shooting each other with machine guns while wearing casques. I mean, this is.
Yeah, it's like Trinity's hot.
Exactly, but yeah. The thing is though, is that it really is done because Christianity is something that if people have, it can override a lot of things. So a lot of people, we hear all these stupid speeches from people who are religious but probably don't actually know what they're talking about, who say, Jesus can move mountains. If you just believe, anything is possible. They never really go into detail. They kind of say vague stuff that sounds very pop culture-ish at best. But then you go to someone who's a religious scholar and says, oh no, what she meant was that even some of the greatest empires on the earth that have tried to enslave humans for their own uses have been destroyed by faith in the idea of there being a greater being than all of us who wants us all to be not only free, but to be good, and says that he loves people. There's something about the idea of worshiping at the feet of something that tells you, that the family is important, that no dictator who wants to take away all autonomy, no communist regime could ever survive if it was allowed to be around. And that's what they mean when they say they can move mountains, as in they can cripple entire communist belief systems just by saying, well, what about the family? If the family is still intact, communists, Marxists, fascists, and even absolute monarchists cannot win if you have God, So that's what they mean when they say you can move mountains. And that's the thing about movies like this. It's done to make everyone they realize they can no longer force people to do this, to leave what they have as a religion behind, unless you're already a communist country, even then. And you know, the Barbara Streisand effect is real. If you try to force someone to stop thinking a certain way, they'll do the exact opposite. So this is kind of their way of making a joke out of Christianity, because if you want to really enslave people, you can't have them believe that there's an almighty being out there who you are loyal to first, who wants you to have a family, and who wants you to honor your father and mother, who wants you to not seek money, and who wants you to know that he loves you. It's impossible. You know what I mean?
Well, this also is, I mean, obviously, this character is not supposed to be God.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely clear. Like, the idea that, like, I recently, every once in a while, I think, like, somebody will be getting up Styx's ass about religion, and it's like, I get why people think it's their mission to convert people, but I'm like, they will or they won't if they know the material. If they have access to, you know, if the guy can read it, he just does not, it doesn't happen, okay? It will happen if it does. So it's like,
and he's not stupid. Not stupid.
Yeah, he's not stupid, you know. But there's definitely, it was something that I think a lot of this kind of movie points to a problem in the understanding of the theology that for especially Christians, that the entirety of reality was changed by God becoming a living human being who could die, and that very idea that he died, and that there's sort of now an entirely different understanding between humans and the divine, and that he'll always be able to sort of that no matter what flaws, because people get into the whole sin, but they don't really get, everybody actually usually does criticize themselves for their flaws. At some point, they actually have to get over their flaws and try to do better. But how do you motivate someone to do that? They have to make a leap of faith, and that's at some point. I mean, just that simplicity of it. I forget. I think that was like something I got from G.K. Chesterton, possibly. But he was like, even that shows that there's a pattern to the way God behaves throughout the universe. Something drives humans to be as humans are, and humans are the being that improves upon itself.
Yeah, and you know, it's the easiest thing in the world to remind people of why God came down as human. They'd be like, "Well, what the hell? Why would a deity come down into one of us fleshly little beings?" It's because God created us. You know, when you hear we're all God's children, they mean that. That's not just a phrase. People take that for granted. What they mean is God is a benevolent instructor and role model and figure. He is a actual father figure. He sees himself as the mystical super being that created humans as a father figure. And a father is supposed to guide. So coming down in a human form was essentially him trying to be cool and hip with the kids, except it worked. It didn't come off as, well, how do you do, fellow kids? I hear you like playing the Fortnites. It didn't come off like Hillary Clinton's speech, like, I don't know, while they're playing Pokemon Go or something like that. It actually worked. He was trying to essentially help you understand something that you will never truly understand, like divinity, but at least God's attitude and view of humans and the things that he's created by coming down as a human himself. He was trying to get you to understand at least his belief of how he views you by becoming one of us temporarily. That's, you know, so people, you know, that's something people have to remember about why this all happened in the first place. And when that happened, I think one of the reasons why people who don't like Western values, hate Christianity the most, more than Judaism, Islam, or any any other belief system that we come by, even non-religious ones, is because it was the first religion ever to say the deity in human form showed us compassion by being that deity and yet being okay with dying. It humanizes and makes us feel so in touch emotionally with what we're worshiping that you can't just dismiss it as, oh, this is one of those weird, wacky Indian stories about some kind of monkey that would, dance for you, or some weird, wacky desert belief that some kind of giant snake made the world spin. It's not one of those wacky, weird stories. This was a story of a very human person you could relate to. You know what I mean?
Well, I would actually even simplify it, because I've actually gathered something from listening to Styx that really made me say Jay Dyer and then Styx Hexenhammer. Jay Dyer is a very knowledgeable Orthodox man, and it really I have to listen to him and then wait weeks to listen to him again because I'm thinking so hard about what he said. He actually made me understand something by when I looked into the magical era of early Christianity, and then looking at the Church Fathers' early writings in the Philokalia. Writing was magic because there were numbers. The letters and the numbers were the same thing. So if somebody said a phrase and it read a certain way and then added up a certain way, it might be magical numbers, and stuff. People look for stuff like that. Well, the beauty was that with Christianity, it presented this new covenant, a way that people could deal with the divine quite directly. And that the Psalms were something that were relatively well known. If it, like to some extent, because the Septuagint existed, most of the Gospels came much later. That they were 100 years and on. That there were absolute Gospels. So it was really a matter of people celebrating the memory of God as man by singing the Psalms. But mostly from memory or small amounts of writing, I would imagine, that they started to collect as a group, and giving up magic. That no longer was it that you could have like a stone penis and a big booby goddess and some various smelly things that you burn, they smell good, and that you put a little of the perfume on the penis or whatever, at certain moons, and your chickens laid, that was the world for like thousands of years. And I guess, who could say they were wrong until finally, God came as man and said, well, none of that's going to matter anyway. On the other side, it won't matter.
Yeah.
Did you help anybody who was starving? Were you playing with your penis?
Yeah, that's the funniest thing I could ever hear someone say about that. Oh, well, Christians, regardless of what they believed, they at least help some people. These people may believe something else, but they were just playing around with their penis, literally. By the way, check this guy out. He has one more letter than my name. Marcion of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What do you know about him? Because apparently.
I only know the reference to him because of theological stuff that comes up, and they would talk about Marcionism, because as I'm recalling, Marcionism was one of those early schools that I think was, I forget if it was decided that it was not, like there was something about it that was not, that I thought was not orthodox, but I forget. And it's similar to how like the Aryans of the German early German churches and stuff like that. It was an ideology that they're like, no, this is, you got a flaw here in your theology. But I forget. I would have to. Hey, yeah, I don't know well enough.
So the Arians are kind of a group that messed up with what the Bible was actually saying.
They were followers of Arius and Arianism, and that had something to do with the dualism of the hypostasis of God, if I remember. So Jesus having a nature totally separate of God.
So it was kind of like this. So it's almost kind of like Taoism, but applied to Christianity.
Well, it was mostly because as one writer I had gone. There was something I made a video of. He applied it that he's like, oh well, this is the way that Germans would have understood it in relationship to their deities and the death of their was it Odin and Thor and that relationship.
Well, essentially, it was kind of like a converted version of Christianity to help them kind of figure out what's going on. But
it came out of the natural syncretism. Yeah, and it was that and they were like, no, these are not two separate people in a way, you know.
It's monotheistic, 100% one. Yeah, and they were kind of having a hard time coming up with that. Now, okay, so that's Mother, and you can kind of understand. I think you really do understand what's going on. This is essentially a perversion of Christian beliefs, and I think it's done intentionally by Hollywood as a more artsy film, because then, a film like this that would go in this direction can't be as overt if it's meant for mass audiences about how disrespectful it wants to be to Christianity. It can't be that, because it would have to go into such a deep philosophical thoughts. But if you make it an artsy movie, you can get a bunch of people online saying, "Oh, well, this movie made me feel so smart." It's kind of like if somebody wanted to make somebody in history look worse than they really are. Well, they couldn't, make one of those pop movies. Like they couldn't make a fun movie like a Marvel movie. They might even make Marvel movies just so they can pay to make really action-looking movie about, I don't know, Winston Churchill, and then say, oh, Winston Churchill was a cannibal who ate children.
Then it suddenly has him, walk into some room, take his hat off, put his cane down, and then just, start gobbling down on like a dog or something, It's like, God damn that Hitler. Yeah, totally. Wait, give me 1 second. I gotta grab some water. Hey, I'll be right back.
Yeah. Oh man!
All right.
Yeah, but they try to make it more artsy seeming. And that's actually why, if you watch the movie, it's clearly designed to look good, so that way people kind of forget about what's actually going on. And it's definitely done, and it definitely uses a lot of different camera angles and camera storytelling, with a lot of good editing. And that's what I've noticed about a lot of the best ways people who are somewhat smarter than most of the masses, who just don't care about God, Christianity. They're Sunday Christians, and so they just do what they do, and you're never going to convince them to look deeper into the religion, nor are you going to ever convince them that God doesn't exist. They're just set in their ways. So some of the people who are more able to be convinced, I think that they do kind of similar to what Vice, I think, has started to do more often. They start adding a bunch of really new and good-looking stories. I'll say this much: Vice definitely knows how to edit. even Vox is pretty good at that too. You know, they definitely, you know, not only use a lot of good editing, but a lot of good sound design and everything. So that way, since the presentation looks so good, they can kind of get away with saying things that are absolutely ridiculous. You know, essentially, it's a sensual pleasuring of the mind that makes you slowly forget, you know, about what they're saying and kind of just take it at face value. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I just think that this era of time, this is what the West it has this intense concentration on. I don't. America just has this really intense concentration on this sort of demented, or that cinema is into that. Like I myself, I find it interesting. What if I search on YouTube? What are other people putting on their like search history or their playlists? You know, like I'm fascinated with video game walkthroughs. There's, I mean, the video game walkthrough people are a huge industry. There's people who make a living on it. Mm-hmm. It's real positive and fun, and it's like, and not, you know, and there's no real politics to it.
There's no like deep, you know, philosophizing about the gender norms of Sonic the Hedgehog.
Totally, you know, and that's the thing. Yeah, you can watch the people who say their thing, like Rad Brad. Rad Brad is just not going to talk politics, and he goes from game to game, and he just goes through it, and like looks like a lot of fun, doesn't it? You know, tell me when you start watching, blah blah blah. You know, and then you get to watch him die a lot, and it's really funny. You know, and you know, there's other people who say like the EVE online players, where it's some of these people are a personality unto themselves, you know, that they're practically role playing, you know, during the gameplay, or, you know, all kinds of, you know, it's like, and I found it very interesting that just that niche is its own world, and Hollywood is having to come up with Hollywood is just attracting these people who want to be sophisticates. But it's just this really kind of demented, sad, satanic stuff, and it's like, I'm so sophisticated. I watch people eat babies, you know, and it's just it's after a while, it actually makes me a little sad that is what Hollywood is. When I think about like Humphrey Bogart or The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, you know, I'm like, man, The Good, and Bad, and the Ugly was so much fun. It wasn't deep, but it was fucking great, you know? Man, it was so much fun. Why can't you have fun anymore in any way? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? Like, there's even, like, people do analysis of movies like Batman and Robin, stuff like that, and they go into the philosophy. But even then, it's just fun. They don't really take it too seriously. You know, and this is one of my favorite YouTubers out there who just does things for fun, nothing else.
You know, if I could throw this out to be way, I would stop it. You let what chick be. Oh, wait, hey, look at Ronnie. Yeah, I'll tell you. Come with the clapping music. God bless you.
Oh my god. Oh my god, who is this guy? Slob Tube Rewind. That is hilarious.
Yes, Slob Tube Rewind. This is Life of Boris. Is Boris?
Oh my god.
And he calls, and by the way, he's really, really popular, and he calls himself Slob King.
All right, Slob King. I'll look it up.
The gift winning this game is the last after all.
Oh my god.
His name is Pornflakes.
Faction loader, rank rookie, reputation neutral. Oh my god.
Ой, и пол. Лучше ну, хотенько не хватит.
Oh, this is the best ever. You gotta hear this.
Dad's not a morning person, but Echo definitely helps him wake up.
Get up, you stand for work, yeah. You stand for work.
By the way, guess who he shoots in this one part?
Yeah. You stand for work.
That was Keemstar.
Oh, okay. I'm like, I know that face, but I can't. It has something to do with the kill stream.
Yeah. By the way, Blyat, B-L-Y-A-T is, well, that's their way of saying fuck.
Morning person.
Oh, got it.
He helps him wake up.
Get up, you stand for work, yeah.
Next day, I was informed that she left the job.
All the gopniks.
Oh my god. That is amazing looking. That is so outlandish.
Yeah. You know what gopnik means, right?
What? No.
It usually refers to like lower class Slavs and like high rise apartments. Well, if, in their early 20s or in the early 30s.
Okay.
Kind of like gangsters almost. Not even necessarily gangsters. It could just mean like you live the harder, rougher life. So a lot of people call themselves like I'm so gopnik because it kind of means like you're hard ass. But yeah, look at all the gopniks. These are all the gopniks.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
I've heard about this channel, but I have never watched it.
Ukrainian girl.
It won't copy strike me for this,
You can swallow.
but I have never watched it.
So, let's agree on one thing. Slav girls are fucking hot.
Oh, I gotta admit, no, Eastern European women, it took me a while to kind of really figure out like what about them was like so attractive and so interesting, and it depends on which kind, but yeah, no, they're pretty great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't ever make them mad.
Oh no!
I've kind of gotten the feeling they have a very fascinating form of making your life hard.
Yes. Here's the thing. There are 3 types of women you never make angry. Number 1, Italians. Never piss off an Italian woman. And I mean true Italian, like Sicilian. It will go bad for you very fast. Never do it. Don't do it. Trust me, it's not worth it. Whatever you think it's worth it, it's not. Number 3, Mexicans. Just gonna leave it at that. Number 3, any Slav ever. Like, disagree with them as much as you want, or tell them to fuck off, but never stick around and try to intentionally make them angry. You will find out they are very creative. Right?
Yeah, I just kind of get this feeling that it's like with that hotness comes power crazy.
Mm.
You know, it's like, well, if you want to unleash it, just play around.
Yeah.
Fuck around, find out. Yeah.
Just don't ever cheat. Or at least don't get caught. Ever. Ever. Listen to this. This is...
Boris won't copy strike me for this.
I won't if you won't.
I can't do it.
Oh god. Here you go.
Oh, what the?
Attention, answer
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. That was great. That was a good one. I got that joke. Okay. Oh my gosh! Yes.
What's up?
Oh well, no. That isn't that what's that old character from that internet comic strip. There's the dog and the with the sunglasses, and is the big backyard fight dog, and oh my god, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of it, but he looks just like that.
Oh man.
Especially Igor. He's raw.
Oh my god.
Oh god, that's so outlandish. It's perfect.
Jesus Christ. And of course, they all have cute tracksuits. They all got the best tracksuits in their body.
I love that he did it to the fucking AK. That was beautiful.
Wait, when did that happen? How long ago was it? Wait, let me see. Oh, shit.
Right there. Still coming. It's coming.
Oh, yeah!
Boom. Already here. I love it.
Oh, man. Kalashnikov Adidas. There's nothing wrong with this. It shows good taste.
Jesus Christ.
No, just Boris. Just без этого.
Gopnik McLeod. Passivity Digital, Life of Boris. Ah! Oh my god. Yeah! Yes!
Нет выпад. Тупые. Ю, тупые в хазырэ. Замики вряд. Кому? Садись в living room. Да не дам, сука, китимони. Это бабушка вряд. А, говно, 10 знатов. Гребл, блин. Гребл, блин.
clean his pancake. Oh, by the way, watch the train. Just watch the train.
Oh my god. That's amazing.
So we got a asthmatic banana, Aluna Lorionova. This chick apparently, and HBKN Super Govnix. Oh man.
Oh man. Dude, that's pretty. I gotta admit, that's pretty cool. The Russia. It's like I've mostly been fascinated with seeing how EVE Online, the Russians are their own thing. You know, because they're their own cultural, like, you know, they're their nation. You know, and it's like every gaming world has like the Russians. You know.
Yeah, look at this Gobnik McBlythe.
Oh, there he goes. Yeah, that's the one. All right. Yep.
Oh man, that's funny.
Hard base school. Oh my god.
Oh, this is great.
Life of Boris Hard Base.
School of Kings. Boris versus DJ Blotzman.
Never fear.
You know what's really funny? Even though a lot of people think that the reason why he puts subtitles on his video is because he intentionally uses an extremely unnecessarily thick Russian accent. The actual reason is because he has a friend who's deaf. So he does that for him, and he's done that for every video. So good on him. Good for Boris. Thank you.
Yeah.
By the way, guess what that is? That's the Gopnik Award.
Oh my god. Yes.
So it's gotta be squatting. Oh, God.
Oh no. Oh my god, no. Okay. I was like, don't eat it. Don't eat it, dude. Don't just suddenly eat a spoonful of that.
I wouldn't be surprised if he did. He actually loves mayonnaise.
I'm getting that idea.
Okay, so before we end the stream, because I want to end it probably at 12 my time, which is 10 your time.
Yeah, totally.
Let's talk about Putin and how he's not such a big fan of anything that has to do with Russian freedom ever. So here's the thing. I know everyone has on the left, like the far left, actually, let's be honest. Dave Rubin is definitely left wing, but he's sane. So there is that. Everyone like on the far left has like Russia derangement syndrome. But we have a really big problem with the right fetishizing Russia as if they can do no wrong. So here's a guy who kind of explains a lot of this. Now, he goes by the name No Fuckers. But you're gonna see what I'm talking about.
Vladimir Putin, в русском рэпе Владимир Путин, ай, Владимир Путин,
Владимир Путин, в русском рэпе Владимир Путин, эй, Владимир Путин, Владимир Путин. Владимир Путин, в русском рэпе Владимир Путин. Что ты можешь рассказать за рэп? Не смей при мне говорить за рэп. Hello Blazers, no fuckers there. Hi guys, today welcome to a brand new video. Today guys, we're back with another video on the beautiful country of Russia, which I happen to be born and raised in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Spent most of my days chilling out, maxing, relaxing, alcohol, and shooting some sauces out of school with a couple of guys that were up to no good. Started making trouble in my neighborhood. I got in one little fight and my mom got scared. She said, "You're moving with your cousin in the town called your mom gay." Anyways, guys, today we'll talk about a bit of politics. Actually, how abysmal the Russian government is at promoting the upcoming election. So if you guys don't know, there's an election going to be happening in Russia in about a month on the 18th of March.
Which Putin will win, because, let's be honest, there is no such thing as a fair election in Russia. It doesn't exist.
There's going to be a presidential election, so we're going to be choosing our president for the next 6 years. Now, it's already pretty fucking obvious that Putin will win because basically we have no choice. They didn't actually allow a couple of candidates like Navalny, for example, to participate in the election. So a lot of people actually boycotting the election now. And in order to make people come to the elections, the Russian government is trying really, really hard, and they're trying to make promotional videos for people to come to elections. And today, guys, we're going to take a look at a couple of those, examine them, and understand how pathetic Russian government is sometimes. If there's not going to be a lot of people who attended the election in the first place, and there's going to be not a lot of voters, then Putin's victory would look kind of pathetic. So they're trying to convince people it's actually coming. This first video is called something like guy rejected by girl like a boss or whatever, 18 plus. Let's check it out. As you guys can see, it's clearly for the youngsters out there who are boycotting because they fucking hate Putin. So check it out, guys. It's relatable. It's in a club, you know. All of young people go to clubs, you know. That's all we do, pretty much. None of us like study or anything like that. Unrealistic scenario though. You didn't even buy her a drink or anything. The only time that happened to me when a girl walked up to me. She asked me for money, and I was like, fuck off. So yeah, it's pretty unrealistic already.
Погоди, тебе есть 18? Конечно, я уже взрослый. Ты сегодня голосовал?
Нет, нафига?
Тогда какой же ты взрослый?
Jeez. Oh, that's so freaking lame. Holy crap.
And hey, kids, let me do the chicken dance. Do you think this is cool?
Oh my god, dude. That was super fucking lame.
Oh my god. How many people do they think that actually convinced? Like, what? Oh my god. There must be a baby boomer generation of people in Russia, I swear. Because I don't know how out of touch you have to be to make something like that. Like, what do you think?
It's just, yeah, it's a pretty tone deaf. It's a pretty tone deaf movie. It's a pretty tone deaf ad. Yeah. It's just They just don't have. They didn't need to fight for it really hard. So he's gonna win, and he did win. So
he did win again.
I mean, didn't he?
I have no idea, but let me check.
I mean, that's what I was presuming because the election was 2018.
Yeah. Okay, so Putin has yep, it looks like he won. Jesus Christ. Vladimir Radish. God damn it. So, yeah, it looks like he probably won. Russian results, net voters enrolled, register, blah, blah, blah. Russian results, presidential election. I'll read that some other time. But yeah, I'm pretty sure Putin won. But regardless, you know,
Are you guys convinced yet? Did that advertisement convince you guys to come and vote for Putin? Some AIDS-ridden whore in a club just rejected you because you didn't vote for Putin today.
Нет, нафига? Да какой же ты взрослый.
You know, the moral of the story is, should have voted Putin, bruh. You know, only the dudes who vote Putin get the bitches, okay? Bitch ass, if you vote Grudinin, кандидат от народа. If you vote Zhirinovsky, if you vote Navalny, you're a liberal SJW cuck. You don't get bitches, okay? If you only vote for Putin, the god himself, you get mad bitches, and of course, you can get results. I mean, this is fucking genius. The only way this video would be a bit better if the girl actually said, "Did you vote for Putin today?" And the guy's like, "Why would I vote for Putin? I don't like him." And she's like, "Well, you're not grown up then, bitch ass. Fuck off. I am letting you smash my pussy in this dirty ass AIDS-ridden toilet of this club." This is fucking abysmal. Then there's also this video they made which is called "Why It's Important to Vote" in 2018. So let's check it out.
It is the funniest shit you'll ever see. Here we go.
And,
All right.
It will convince us that we have to vote for Putin.
Я будильник на 9 поставила.
Молодец. А теперь выключи его. Завтра воскресенье.
Завтра же дел много. Еще на выборы надо успеть.
На выборы собралась, ишь ты. То без тебя там не выберут. Кандидаты завтра вечером рыдать будут, крокодили слезы лить. Ой, Люсенька, не пришла, не проголосовала. Как-нибудь без ее голос поймем, кто это будет.
He doesn't like to vote. However, his wife is a proud Putin voter. Check her out. This is what a real Russian woman looks like. A real Russian woman must support Putin. Otherwise, she's a feminazi lesbian slut, something like that. So the guy's waking up, and somebody's knocking on his door. Next day, after the election.
Oh my god.
They just dabbed.
Oh my god. That was kind of great. I was not expecting anything like that. Oh my god! All right, Russia. Wasn't wow.
That should be every Russian military salute ever.
That was fucking awesome.
Hi, we work for Vladimir Putin. Dabbing.
No! He just fucking dabbed. He just dabbed, okay? Look, if that becomes a thing, like, instead of doing this, a person in the army would have to do this, then I'm voting for Putin if he doesn't change that. Because our country will become so fucking cancer if soldiers have to do this every time. В армию.
Какую армию? Мне 52 года.
We work for Putin.
Призывной возраст подняли до 60.
Кто поднял?
Как кто? Президент? Вы же сами за него голосовали.
Да ни за кого я не голосовал. До свидания, дядя.
Пап, дай мне 4 миллиона. Мне в школе на охрану сдать надо.
Came back to life or some shit because only the president could pay 4 million for one piece of clothing.
Люсь, так, это что еще за хрен? Я вообще-то гей на передержке. Кто?
I'm a gayer now.
Yes! Oh my god, they nailed it! That is fucking gold!
You mean what he looks like?
Я вообще-то гей.
You mean what he looks like, or just the fact that he's gay?
I mean that they took it to this surreal level in a political ad that, I mean, you can never get away. This is something you need YouTube and keep it on.
Oh man, that's funny.
In like America, like United States, America, on any network of any sort.
Like
It's classic.
Only in Russia. where they don't, where the overlords of YouTube don't know what they're saying. So you know.
Apparently, yeah.
And the best part is Sergey Brin, who invented Google, and who's the chairman of Alphabet, which is a conglomerate of everything that Google owns. He's from Russia, so the irony knows no bounds.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Передержки. Кто? Ну ты чего? Сегодня по закону любая семья должна брать гея на передержку, тех, которых партнер оставил. Ну, неделю. Если вы никого не найдете себе в пару, тогда тебе придется с ним быть. Закон.
Okay, this is pretty funny, although we could argue it's a bit homophobic. However, I would like to just say this. I mean, we all know that regardless of if you come to vote or if you don't come to vote, regardless who you vote for, Putin is gonna win anyway. So regardless, you have to offer housing to a faggot in the Kremlin. Yeah, guys, I'm pretty sure the KGB is ready at my fucking door.
Внимание! Количество посещений туалета ограничено.
This feels like 1984, and honestly, if you vote for Putin, that's what's gonna happen in 3 years, okay? He's gonna install cameras to see how we have sex, how we eat, how we shit, how we piss. It's gonna be, because Russia, the way it's going now, we're basically turning into North Korea, slowly and steadily, so... Actually, if you vote for Putin, this might happen. And you know, this sort of propaganda advertisement pieces, it doesn't really convince me into actually going and voting for Putin.
Ты чего? Чё, на выборы вставай быстрее, чё? А то поздно будет.
The dabbing must not start.
Yes.
Oh god. Honestly, it was just so perfectly timed. Like, hello, we ordered for the Russian army. Dab.
I know, totally. That was just great. Yeah, and the best part that got me is how the random jet black man in the background is what got me about it.
Oh my god. Oh man. Oh, by the way, you gotta listen to this.
Hi, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. I was too busy at the headers. Yeah, that's the way to revive a dead channel, isn't it? It's to start a video with a meme from 2014. Hello, Blazers, it's me. It's your boy Vodka. I'm back. As you guys can see, I got the lab sunglasses on deck because today, guys, we're gonna be talking about Russian YouTube drama. Because, guys, it seems like actual original content on my channel gets no views whatsoever, so I've got to do this. Why Russian drama today specifically? I mean, there's nothing interesting going on right now in the western parts of YouTube, you know, it's just chaos.
Okay. Oh, here we go.
Hello, comrades. This is your Tavarish, no fuckers bangers, and today, guys, you might notice that I have a very familiar flag in the background, because this is what we're going back to right now in Russia. This is where the progress is heading, back to the USSR, baby. Because Russia right now is trying to ban the entire genre of rap, and certain artists are getting censored big time.
Because the internet never existed. It's a very plausible plan. I mean, does Putin realize, and no, this is a legit thing. Like, let me show you. It's like literally everywhere. Like, he legit wants to make rap music illegal to perform into the country. Now, he's saying it's because it causes degeneracy, but I'm like, okay. No. This is the same argument they use when they say violent video games cause mass shootings. No. Sure, well, can it kind of glamorize some of it? And maybe. And, you know, obviously, if parents aren't in the room, making sure their kids are listening to the right stuff, I can understand that when you're young, but you're going to get older and you're going to be able to handle that kind of stuff. And any kind of idea that it's going to cause degeneracy, is not going to be solved by saying you're not allowed to listen to it.
That's the thing. I gotta admit, I could totally agree with him and realize, you're not really going to
Win.
solve this. Yeah, you're not going to win this way. Like, do you remember how Tipper Gore tried this with the little sticker on everything? But I mean but it's also he could probably figure out a lot of ways of fucking around with with their acts and their insurance companies to insure their shows so
yeah, but people just go underground, and come on, does he really think this is going to work with the internet?
Totally.
I mean, come on. Like, Donovan, do you think you could actually ban rap music?
I know, yeah. No, it's one of those things like, yeah, it's kind of silly.
Yeah. And not only that, let's be honest, Vladimir, the thing is, the reason why I wanted to talk about this tonight is because Vladimir Putin is not the great savior of the West. He's just not the enemy of America at the moment. And Hillary Clinton would have done everything she could have to be against him. He's an enemy of the EU for sure, and he doesn't like globalism. But I think the right is heavily fetishizing him and his regime, and most of all Russia in general, to the point where we can't see that Putin's not pro-free speech at all. There is no such thing as free speech in Russia. There's like looser laws, but he's not pro-free speech. And the thing is, one of the reasons why free speech is so important is it's a great way of finding out when something is true or not. Because if you can't question something, if you are not allowed to speak freely, you can't compare what someone is saying, a human being who is mortal, who is selfish, who is able to lie, against, what the opposition is saying. You can't bullshit test anything. So, I mean, does any of this make sense to anybody who's watching right now?
I totally get it. One of the things as I started to read the early alternative right blog spot and then got familiar with the various things that would get submitted that were essays by Dugan, or he was being quoted and somebody was banding about an idea along those lines. The idea that I have gotten is with Trump, and especially I believe it's Gorka and whoever Gorka's field of people are, the culture issue is America needs to step back away from Russia and needs to, as much as possible, not be seen as attempting cultural subterfuge. Because, one, we've lost a lot of intelligence assets during the Clintons' fuck-ups. Opened up a lot of our intelligence assets, supposedly. But then the other issue, from what I've heard, is then that it's, too, that it would be really great if we weren't constantly trying to export our society into theirs, no matter if they liked it or not. And so it's this backing away from them, like, okay, you guys have enough of your own problems with alcoholism and all this opiates that are all the heroin coming in from Afghanistan. And that's a big part of our pullout from Afghanistan and why so many of our deep state people are pissed, because they were flooding Russia with heroin and it was breaking down their youth. And they're doing the same here. But that was one of a strategy. It was a rat line that's something I've heard. And so a big part of Putin's fight has to do with that. And him and Trump seem to be on a kind of agreement with this.
The idea that we just leave Russia the hell alone, right?
Yeah, and that we flatten this heroin rat line out of Afghanistan that's being run apparently by a variety of intelligence services or something like that.
Yeah, although I don't. Although Dugan tries to make it sound like that's a fourth ideology, that doesn't make sense to me. I've never. I mean, it's not a fourth ideology. That's just someone saying, "Just don't fuck with us." Anyone can have that. I really.
Oh, well, no, but actually, let's really. I had to consider this once I thought it through. It would have been, Rome. Rome becomes Christian, Holy Roman Empire. Then you get the various revolutions and the Protestants, and you get these empires after empires after empires. You have one period of time that nations could exist. This very short window in the late 1800s to the early 1900s, and it becomes empire again. And this is the first time that Russia actually really is having to play a careful game just to keep its federation intact. And it is this thing of, if you guys were just to leave us alone, we could really succeed here. But we've got such a fucking budget and effort fending you fuckers off, and this isn't helping any of the EU either.
Yeah, but
so yeah,
that's not an ideology. That's not a worldview. That's really more of just a desire, a raw, random desire.
Well, but but in a sense, the way that it's a worldview is that this is no longer, say, the idea of the Masonic Enlightenment being spread to Russia. That was a key part of Tsarist Russia and the Tsar's fall, is that the Tsar was against. That was a very, very specific thing. The Tsar was against the spread of Freemasonry and a lot of their Enlightenment ideas. He felt it needed to be controlled as an outside ideological force, and there were members of the Orthodox Church who had gotten into it because they were taking on Enlightenment ideas, and like the Gregorian calendar and other stuff that was totally technological and scientific and very good for Russia. But what happened was he pushed against the idea of liberal governance, of voting and that kind of thing, and too much. And the forces of the West were an ideological block of sorts, and they were like, fuck that, we can take you out, we will. And so right now Russia is dealing with this idea of that the West again has formed an ideological block. You Russians are doing something we don't like. We can't really prove it. It's in policy, but fuck you guys, and we're gonna mess with you about it. And so that's why it's like I really do see it as he is talking about a new type of politics that's going to be post-EU and post-UN, and that probably won't be that long from now.
That sounds extremely vague to the point where it almost seems like he's trying to avoid saying what he really means, because by keeping it... This is actually one of the laws of power, in the 48 laws of power. I'm called always say that's the net. Use vagaries and large statements to make yourself sound more intelligent than you really are. You'll captivate people's minds, and you'll keep yourself from saying something stupid. It really just seems like a bunch of Hegelian style non-stop verbiage.
Well, Dugan has that quality to him, but I mean, like, say, let's posit it this way.
Yeah.
Let's apply it.
Okay.
Dugan's world would be great if the EU divided along what's called the three lines of Europe. That there would be the coastal west, Britain independent, the central column, Germany down to the boot of Italy, and the eastern portion, which would be like the Balkans, all the way up to like, like stuff like Estonia and Latvia and all that business.
Oh, so
And up to the border of then Russia, which would be the Russian Federation. Yeah. And so that's what he probably wants, somewhat ideally, if he could get it. If they could put enough pressure by actually saying, we'll do deals with you, but boy, Brussels, those guys are dicks.
that seems more like just a general grievance. It seems more like again, here's what I see politics as actually being. Philosophy of how power should be distributed and used. Anything more is just extra and is designed to confuse. It's kind of a first principles approach. You work up from what you know to be true, and you reason from there. Think about it.
Well, no, but what I mean is that this is for their actual benefit. This is what would benefit them.
Mm-hmm.
Is that arrangement? Because to them, because this is an idea that's actually come out of pro Putin kind of stuff that I've read. That I forget the website at the moment what it's called. But this was just an article that was in there that talked about the EU dividing naturally along those lines. And the reason why is because they were talking about the Visegrad group and then Italy and other nationalist parties and their relationships, and it said seems like it's dividing in these three stripes. Now, that could be how they interpret what's happening, and that would be to their advantage. That would be they're being like, this is great, this is going our way. Well, it's good to know they think that, because that's what they want. And if that's what they want, then it's important to get, okay, so that's how they view Europe as, like, that's what, to them, that's what Europe really is. It's actually, these groups are more like one another, and as groups that have mutual interests and trade interests, they would make more sense like this. So, for us Russians, this is better as well, because you all aren't one big group, the EU, and as well as NATO, and are forward basing against us all the time with the help of the United States.
So, in other words, his philosophy is an autistic kid looking at what groups are the same and putting them into little bins.
The main reason, say, with Visegrad would have, not only do they have a lot of mutual interests, but they all border each other, but also they actually see each other as different than Russia, and they see each other as quite different than, say, Germany, because they had all at some point been under both countries' heel.
Mm-hmm.
And so Russia is looking at it as Visegrad are countries that have their own interests as a bloc. All these large blocs to them are just empires that eventually will invade them. And they are correct in that. That never fails. That model never has failed. If it becomes an empire and that empire comes up to their border, that border will start moving toward St. Petersburg and Moscow. They are not stupid. They are correct in that interpretation of history. They will always be invaded by land by any empire that exists on their border.
That's literally just saying people are greedy for land, and because Russia is close enough, why not?
Well, I mean, but that is what has and always will happen because of the actual terrain of Russia.
Because it's flat?
Yeah.
Okay. So, in other words, it's an attitude that you take because your country's easy to invade.
And they have to. They absolutely cannot do something else because they just can't afford to.
So Russia, in other words, is a paranoid country that wants to be left alone because people constantly have invaded it. And that's why they took over most of the northern half of Asia, so they'd have more mountains to fall back to.
That and I think that when it came to like Siberia and Mongolia and all those countries, I'm not sure how much raw control they really had of them. I don't even know how those countries quite fall in their federation even, actually. I gotta admit, it's just they never come up really. I'd have to look it up. I haven't looked up stuff about Mongolia in a few years now.
Okay, so the closest thing I could think of to a worldview that Dugan would ever have is isolationism. That seems like the only thing you could possibly call it.
Well, BC, there we go. That's a term from a different era. So it made sense in that era. But a political ideology, every time the conditions change, it is a new political ideology. It can look like something in the past, but the conditions have definitely changed, and changed in a way that do not apply to history, such as weapons.
I don't know about that.
Like space weaponry. Space weaponry and nuclear weapons change everything. And so so their political ideology, like the idea what Trump is doing right now, an empire like ours has never existed, and he is pulling as much power back toward the continent, and he is also attempting to limit federal power. That nothing like that has ever been done.
No, that's just Marxism.
Well, yeah, we could call it that because that's the brand new term. That is what that describes then, because it has never happened ever before in our history.
It could be explained by the fact that this is something anarchists would say, that states just naturally want to gain more and more power, and so an individual that tries to pull it back, it probably won't be very successful unless they become the presidents and are willing to take the hard risk of getting shot. And
giving up that executive branch power, that gives everybody else in the executive branch a lot of power, and so there's a lot of people they're enjoying that. They're enjoying being in, like that Project Veritas showed. Those people love being unaccountable and having lots of power. Yeah,
but that honestly doesn't seem like an actual philosophy of any kind. At least not. It seems like Dugans just wants to divide the Mediterraneans amongst themselves, the Anglos, not really the Anglos. Well, yes, the Anglos, and then the Saxons. Obviously there's a difference between the two. Yes, we hear the term Anglo-Saxon, but like English, Irish, British, shit like that. Then have, Germanics, guessing Czech, Prague, Germany, stuff like that.
Well, I mean, say the encouragement of nationalist movements, I would absolutely say, because Russia has been changing its tack by sort of obviously supporting outlets that take the idea of nationalist movements seriously as political, philosophic, political things, the real political entities, and it has worked. It has completely and totally worked. It's making the EU come apart at the seams. It's making Brexit, maintain being a thing. The yellow vests, that's a part of it. Marine Le Pen is back in the news. Lega Nord in Italy and all that. So I mean, they've worked, you know, and it was because we needed to doubt empire, because the EU is the legal structure that was put together by the Third Reich for how they were going to govern their future European superstate. And that Russia had to approach that according to its interests, and it had to conceive of, well, what's the argument against that?
Okay, so it just seems like all Russia was doing was essentially saying, you guys do know that this empire that they're creating is just that. It's not actually what they told you it was, which is a peacekeeping organization. That seems to be about it. Like, look, all I'm saying is I don't trust people like him, Dugan in particular, because when you really start to take away high-level intellectual language and you say, what does this really mean? No BS. You start to see that it's actually a lot simpler than you think. And it seems like what you're describing is a man who simply has the ideology, if we even want to call it that, of being left alone and destroying a coercive empire that wants to conquer them. It doesn't seem much more complicated than that.
And they do want, like, it is solidly, you know, preserving Russian power, but also it does have to do with then Russia dominating the central continent, Eurasia, in the long run. And so that is the issue that America has to take very seriously. And as soon as we just accept
Donovan. So, and I think we both know what you mean when you say dominating. They don't mean by being better at trade. You mean by force or coercion of some sort.
Well, that's the thing, is it doesn't look like they're trying to do that. It looks like they're trying to do it through trade.
I don't think so. I really don't believe that. Crimea was a good example of the opposites.
No, that's again, that anybody who thinks that, well, I have no clue where they got their information on it. Because the whole Crimea separation this is again a thing that Putin has done by the letter every step of the way. He has made sure to file every grievance with all the international bodies that he's supposed to, and Crimea split off completely legally. And the whole Ukrainian government was a junta we sponsored under Obama. That was Soros, Obama, and Clinton, like running an op to take over the Ukrainian government. That was entirely artificial.
Wasn't Ukraine its own country? It's not sovereign from Russia?
Yeah, it was. It was completely sovereign. And when we took over their government with the Maidan, or just made their government flee to the east, that they didn't. I don't think they thought they would be able to break off the Crimea and seal it off. I don't think that Obama's administration thought that that Putin would be able to turn them back.
Oh, yeah, but what about his invasion of Georgia?
Oh, okay, so that one's actually kind of interesting. It turns out that that's the famous "Don't hang noodles from my ears" line that he said to Bush. Bush had actually, the CIA had done something where they had gotten some mujahideen to fire rockets or do some mischief in that area at that borderline. And so Russia came in and was like basically showing force to kind of get Georgia to understand, like, whatever the United States is offering you, we're not fucking, this shit isn't happening. And then it turns out I later started looking at pipeline routes. That very stretch of land is critical to all of the future pipelines from Inner Asia to Turkey and they were supposed to go to Cyprus. So these are just ways that America is actually playing the chessboard, cutting off energy development of Russian energy firms and other firms that are going to be basically kind of that, like, Russia will be developing that country's energy sector. They'll be heavily involved in it because they're just historically they're bordering, like Tajikistan and stuff like that, and we're trying to get in there. We are trying to get in the way over and over and over again of their pipelines.
I think there's more to it than that.
And so then the other has. So how do you confirm it? Well, then we must have had another plan. This plan was the tap line, the Trans-Arabian tap line that goes up through Iraq and then would come out, and it goes through the Golan Heights, through the area. Right now, Israel is occupying of Syria's so as to fight all the ISIS that are still there. And this tap line historically, I think, goes out to a port sometimes in Syria, and I think, but now it'd be in Israel. And then there's all the new findings of oil offshore of Israel, but there's a real big bunch off the coastline of Syria. And everybody is gaming for who will control those oil fields in the Mediterranean Sea for the next 100 years. So this was going to be a pipeline that was probably going to go on the Mediterranean floor and then go up to Europe, and it would be basically paying fees to Israel, fees to a friendly government in Iraq, and and so it was all friendly governments, that we liked and we had shed a lot of bullets and blood for and stuff like that.
So it's a war for oil.
The next 100 years oil.
A war for future oil.
Yeah.
And I love how Bernie Sanders keeps saying that there's peak oil coming anytime soon.
Oh, I know, yeah. And sure enough, we found a whole bunch in Texas in the Permian Basin again.
Yeah, peak oil. It's coming, I swear to God. Yeah.
Now, there is going to be, it is true that it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to extract. So it could be that it's not necessarily going to be as profitable as as hopeful, as hoped. We might need a big technological jump, but I mean, we'll see, because we're going to go for it probably.
We're always advancing. We're always advancing. So if we really needed that oil, we'd find a way.
Totally.
But that
hey, yeah, we're at midnight. Yeah, we gotta wrap this mighty Wurlitzer up.
Yeah, but I mean, I'll say this: I really think that there was a lot more to the Georgian invasion than what I think we're both letting on. When you look at it, what is Georgia really attached to? It's attached to a larger strip of Europe. And I'm sure there's some resources in Georgia that Putin would have liked. He didn't exactly leave right away, did he?
Oh yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I didn't follow how long that went on.
I believe it was until the United States got involved, and even then, I think it took 9 months to get them out. That's not a short period of time, especially if you're trying to go for resources. Think about this. Look at how much Russia actually does produce. Guess what one of its biggest imports from the United States is? Chicken. And most food. They cannot produce nearly enough. Their economy, yes, I can see why they would definitely want to fight for the pipeline, because their economy is already very, very much on the pin of a needle. On the head of a needle. So this idea that he invaded Georgia just because of that alone seems rather ridiculous to me.
Oh well, no, but I mean that's
The
that's actually the most likely reason.
No, I'm saying the rockets were. I think he was waiting. Think about this. If you can justify yourself, say they're firing rockets at us. Let's go into Georgia. How much longer? How much easier would it be to get what you want from a foreign nation by first letting them attack you first, to get the international community to back off?
Well, no, but that was the thing that it didn't work that way. Like it literally made him look terrible that he went into South Ossetia. The optics were horrible. That was the whole point. That's why you use proxies and mujahideen, so that the empire then stomps on a bunch of people who look all fucked up, and everyone goes, "How could you?" And that was the thing. Is that's why he said to Bush at the next meeting, because something came up about Georgia, and then he goes, "Don't hang noodles from my ears," because he was pissed. He was like, we are developing our energy sector. We had deals going, and you guys are doing this fucking game with your mujahideen. You know, like, what the fuck is going on? Like, you know, every time we try to get anywhere, you guys suddenly mujahideen pop up.
You really believe that Putin has no interest in conquering other land?
Oh, the physical conquering thing now simply doesn't it doesn't work. It broke the bank for them all the time. They never were pulling it off. It was all a front constantly.
Not even that conquering the land. I mean, as in having everyone play by its music in a way.
Oh, well, that just requires the right kind of disinformation, and then the money. Money talks loudest.
And through intimidation and coercion.
Well, I guess that could work if it. I mean,
think about why. Do you think Poland really trusts Russia, or any of the countries that border Russia trust them to respect their rights?
Well, that's the thing, is it really doesn't behoove Russia at this time to invade neighboring nations. That's why when that went down, it was like, well, what made them invade this? And then when you looked into it, you're like, oh, they're making this claim about mujahideen. Now, years later, that we've seen America using proxies, it's become so clear that we use proxies that it becomes like, well, what was going on in South Ossetia that this would even make sense? And it's, oh, all these pipelines that are going to be extremely important to Tajikistan and all these nations. Well, who would benefit from this? Oh, China, with One Belt, One Road. Their corridor of energy and their corridor and their system will be what you can build, because you don't have all these goddamn mujahideen blowing up the pipelines all the time.
That's a rather interesting statement. I'll leave you with this. It seems rather interesting that this is all happening when Russia is too weak to fight, beyond pushing people back. You can really tell a lot about somebody when they're strong, more than you can when they're weak. Think about that.
And it actually is kind of an interesting thing of when Russia appeared inordinately strong. We have Potemkin villages, and we have the Soviet Union having to use constant graft and fake books to keep the Soviet Union in their uniforms and their parades. Now that they're weak, they utilize YouTube beautifully and finance.
Absolutely.
You know,
They dab their way into the world.
Yep, boom. They're dabbing into the future. Yep.
Oh man, but I mean, what do you think if Russia was strong? Like, let's say they found some resources that were actually really, really good, and they also, they're very technologically, like on a cyber degree, advanced because they have to be.
Yeah, yeah.
So imagine if they were able to, find something like find 3 new resources and industries outside of the pipeline, and so it didn't even matter, and they were all in the heart of the actual land of Russia. Do you think, and they developed for like 10 years to be a much bigger superpower than they were, than they are right now? Do you think they'd be as friendly to their neighbors?
Honestly, they have so much space to develop, and I'm not even kidding. They have so much room that they could fill humans in. That honestly, if they were to literally just concentrate on a rate of growth of 2% a year, that would be this monumental effort that they would have to shape the next like generation for. I mean that like they have just to be able to make a defensible population is going to require another 100 years for them. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They just simply don't have the human numbers.
Yeah.
For all of the space and it's just so goddamn big.
I mean, Russia has entire like thousands of miles where there's just nobody.
Yeah. I couldn't even imagine what it must try to be like to try to defend what kind of budget like they must have to look at, like, or the methods by which they have to try to figure that out. Like, yeah.
But I'm sure you and I can both agree Putin is definitely not a free speech person.
Oh, no. I don't think, no, none of our ideas of negative rights, no, that's not going to happen for a long time there.
I think that's what, well, that and the fact that, yes, Putin, I see Russia as only doing right now because it has to. Because there's a necessity to not, wake the sleeping giant, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. With a certain amount of liberties, as we would think of them, you have a list of things you are totally allowed to do. That then everybody could conduct business and they could have, a relatively normal life. Like everybody knows that there's these things that go by these sets of rules. Now, once you venture into this other realm that you're not really sure if that's going to get you in trouble, it's like, do you dare do that? Or do you just not do that?
Well, I kind of meant with other nations, as in they're friendly with other nations, I think, right now, because doing the wrong thing, even if the optics are bad for them with what they did do in Georgia, if they intentionally went into Georgia and wanted and incorporated into Russia, it would have been way worse. They will never intentionally do anything that they know will make them look bad because they just cannot afford to.
Yeah, and it invites. It just is too much goddamn trouble. They might as well buy off a government.
Yeah, they're already a sparse enough government. But hey, let's watch this one video just for a laugh because it's political, but not really. It's kind of funny actually. So
yeah.
What if Mussolini remade the Roman Empire?
After the video, Rome, the empire that laid the groundwork and contributed so much to the modern West. Millennia ago, it united most of Europe under one banner. That didn't last, of course. Ever since the collapse of such a vast empire, Rome's homeland of Italy has never been able to reclaim.
By the way, I just want to say one thing. I'm not in disagreement with Russia about the idea that the EU is cancer. I'm just saying I think the right nowadays thinks that Russia and Putin and everything to do with the Eastern Bloc can't do no wrong, to the point where they don't even see that there are actually human rights being violated, and they don't realize that the reason why Russia is better than the EU is because it's a place where some of what they do is bad, but they're not the worst thing ever to come around. But the EU is a new rendition of the USSR that just hasn't quite passed enough articles and regulations to become what it wants to be, which is just pure control.
Yeah, it's and my thing that I've found interesting about Dugan has various interviews that what he outlines at some point he gets very practical in a few interviews, and everything is down to just only trade and military realities, where he's like, if these are the ports that Russia has, these are da-da-da, and he just mapped it out, and he's like, these are our weaknesses, and everyone understands this, and we have to be realistic about our interests will mostly be around those subjects at all times. They can never be, anything else. And he said, and then defending the Russian culture as it is. And now that is the part that I am like, so what's going on inside Russia that you're quote unquote defending the culture, and now we're finding out they're banning various types of not so Russian music.
Well, I think I kind of understand Dugan a little bit more. I think what he's concerned about is he doesn't really have okay, I'm going to say this. I don't think he can say he has a philosophy, because having a philosophy in the way he says it would be like liberalism versus communism versus fascism. Those are actual philosophies where there are principles laid out as to how you will act in all situations, no matter what the conditions. That's why I don't quite agree with the idea that it's a fourth political theory. But what I do think is he has truly different political viewpoints. I think he's just in the mindset of survivalist. Russia must focus on, like, he's kind of like if you've ever played a video game.
Actually, you're totally right. Actually, you're absolutely correct.
Do you mind? If like you've been shot by your enemies in a video game a bunch of times and your health bar is really low, and now you're just focused on, okay, get another health pack and don't get shot while you run around in this one base or whatever. Is that kind of it?
Well, I mean, you're right in that it doesn't have a set of principles. You're absolutely correct. He actually is so vague. He's like, the fourth political theory is something that is yet to be, but it will encompass, say, for Russia, these geopolitical and economic realities.
Yeah, that's why I've been getting at. I guess that's why I've had such a big thing about it, is that, he literally describes things like liberalism. The elected members of our governments and negative rights and some positive rights. Fascism, unity no matter what, unity of an entire people, and cooperation, and kind of a marriage between corporation and the states. Believe it or not, that's actually what fascists say that their economic system is. I know this because I had someone from the American Corporatist Party on.
I never heard of that. Huh.
Yeah, you should look into it. The American Corporatist Party. Marshall Ironsides is also a self-proclaimed fascist. So, there's that. And then, of course, there's communism, which is that everyone is equal by force no matter what. So Dugan really doesn't have a fourth political ideology. He has a fourth, or theory, if you want to call it that. He has a different viewpoint of what Russia needs. And philosophy and a set of principles is kind of irrelevant. Because regardless of how Russia is able to function, it must survive. Before there's a principle of negative rights or a principle of corporatism or a philosophy of everyone is equal, Russia must just not die.
Yeah.
That's what it is, isn't it?
And it's a very, you could very much get this, why he's also able to intertwine this then with orthodoxy in a syncretic way, that he's able to use then the idea of Christian defense, that if you concentrate on all those little, all the commandments of charitas toward those in the community, your community will all know one another, will be tightly bound, people will be personally indebted toward one another, but there will, because it was charity, they also won't really be indebted to one another, but they will definitely always be interdependent. And that, in the Christian idea of warfare, is true holy defense.
That we are all brothers underneath Christ, and we must defend the homeland.
Yeah, because there'd be no choice. There'd just simply be no choice.
Now I don't have as much of a problem now that we've talked about this with Dugan. I just don't like. I just wish he was more honest.
And it's mostly without knowing that the Orthodox, the way they think, it's really difficult to try to even. I had to read a lot about the way the Orthodox think to understand, like, because since the Protestant period, the Protestants think differently about the world, and so they did something different when pressures were on them. They're like, let's see if we get in a boat. You know, these Germanic peoples were like, if we get in a boat, let's see what happens. And yeah.
Did they change the Catholic perspective though, by chance?
Catholicism was officially kicked out of the British Isles.
No, I'm saying, but like, did they change the way modern Catholicism is? Do you think, like to the point where it really is not the same thing, or did they?
Oh yeah. It's modern after World War II. Catholicism it would be unrecognizable to somebody from, like, say 125 years ago.
So it really is a sham of what it used to be.
Unfortunately, there's people who do it, but they live in strange, small, tucked away places where the diocese doesn't bother them. Nobody messes with their way of life, you know. But, like, say the real old masses, that was changed by the time I was young. That was changed right before my birth.
So, and is that Vatican II?
Yeah.
Oh, and you know what? Actually, what was his name? Bishop Baron something or another. I don't know if you know this guy, Bishop Baron something. He said that Vatican II was the biggest mistake ever.
There's a lot that right now is a major talk within dissident Catholicism, and I actually encourage the young Catholics to start discussing, you know, like, do they want to at least start really talking about the changes after Vatican II, you know, and oh yeah, that guy, yeah, I've seen him, yeah. And like, you know, it'd be nice for, like, if like Nick Fuentes and other Catholics, like, had like a little, you know, like, what should we do? You know, what would be ideal for us if we could kind of turn things around, because only Catholics can reestablish what's called subsidiarity, the power of the bishopry, and that every bishop and the churches under that bishop are a body unto themselves in the old tradition, and that you can contest Rome from one parish, and so but people have to take back the old ways. A lot of this stuff I learned from Fish Eaters website that they have on being Catholic, and all the old-fashioned things that the Catholics used to do.
Well, think about that. That's kind of similar to America, isn't it? With like the executive branch becoming way bigger than it should be compared to the states.
Oh, totally. Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct. Subsidiarity is that it was copied from that, and especially it was also copied to some degree in the Freemasonic lodge system before it became a lot more well organized after independence and then after the 1700s. But yeah, that subsidiarity was the big deal. One town could challenge Washington.
Yeah, and wasn't that kind of the reason why in Scotland they don't really talk much about the French part of the Masonic Lodge?
I kind of, that's something I don't know a lot about. I like only recently, because of a few books that have come out, have I heard any mention of like that Norman French influence, and did it come from like actual Knights Templars? Was it a part of just when these low Normans entered speculative Freemasonry? Like what we know, like but I haven't looked much into it.
Yeah, believe it or not, part of the reason why I left the lodge was because now I understood why. Believe it or not, it was decreed by the Pope that no Catholic shall ever be a Mason, and I think it's part of that reason. Because of some of the Luciferian beliefs of the theoretical Masons, is what I like to call them, because they really don't actually do any stonemasonry anymore.
Yeah, the key thing that I found most interesting with all religious bodies that object to Masonry, they all talk about the secret oaths, and that idea, and then the other is they cite mysteries, and it's usually in quotes, and it's because they are referring to something that they're like, we are using their word, mysteries, and whatever this refers to, we don't know what it is because it's a secret, and that is fundamentally a violation of the way of the Christian path.
The Christian even telling people exactly what they believe and not being ashamed of it.
Yes.
Because we believe that everybody should have access to this. We literally give out Bibles for free, usually.
Bingo. We're notorious worldwide. They show up with their cheer and their Bibles.
And then there's their versions that are just taken to a new degree. Hi, have you heard about the good news? Oh, fuck, now you people again. Slam the door.
And I mean, very much as opposed to the idea of you have to seek this group out and show up at night and knock on the door and say, I want to know the Mason secret words. It's like, yeah, there's probably maybe something going on, that's a little weird,
You literally put your right hand on a Bible and the left hand on a I know I'm not supposed to say this, but fuck it, I don't care. You put your hand on it, and then you put it upside down on the same Bible while the square and compass is on top, and you say, I so swear to keep these oaths silent at all times, or I agree to have a tongue cut out and thrown into the sea at low tide, just as the tide comes in, and the right side of my heart pierced, and my head shaven bald, as a punishment for diluting the oaths I have taken of the Masonic Lodge to non-members. And you hold up another hand, by the way, while you're doing this, and they literally have a suit that you wear, and they pull out like a breast pocket part of that, and they just poke you with a dull knife.
Yeah. No. There's I actually have I mean, not only a number of different like of those standard kind of like ritual books where somebody like the secrets of Freemasonry, and it's that like book that you could just get at every place. They pop up. It's just generic cover that it was some guy passed out all their rights, you know, and so it's like, oh, okay, you know, that's cool. And people said, yeah, this is generally accurate. And, you know, I'm like, oh, okay, this is a little kooky. It looks like a lot to remember. You know, it looks like a lot of, but I mean, once you remember it, I mean, I guess you guys talk about the local charities or I don't know, whatever. And so, but what I ended up finding interesting is then I started looking into any odd rite that I heard of that I'm like, what the hell is that rite? And I'll look it up, and sure enough, somebody antiquated books, reprints, you could find it, and you would see how they had taken the system of rites, put different names in, maybe changed the story a little, and yeah, you know, some of the names, you know, it'd be the rite of enlightenment, the rite of the sublime rite, something. You know, and that's that one, the Holy Royal Arch, the Royal Arch, you know, and that whatever these lodges were went out of business, you know, decades, you know, 100 years ago, something like that. Then I was like, oh, wow! So you could just franchise this.
You could franchise,
and you know, you got the structure, and you just start up a club, and you got to, you know, and I mean, and I'm like, I didn't want to take anything away from it, you know, because these guys found it so it was a big deal to them, you know, but I didn't want to be like, yeah, you know, it's just franchise, you know, or some. But I was like. And that's when I started to listen to them about the experience of Masons. What do you guys get out of this? You know, personally, the guys on YouTube. And, you know, and that was kind of elucidating as well. It sounded a lot like church in a way, but it was all guys. And so I was like, okay, you know, I get it, you know.
It's a sausage party.
Yeah, you know, and it's smart guys mostly, you know, talking about stuff that smart guys who have families and, you know, like find interesting, you know. And I'm like, oh yeah, you know, I could get that. I could get why you would want to have an important meeting that you had to leave home for, and it's, you know, and all the spooky stuff on the full moon and all that business, you know.
Plus, you know, when you say franchise, by the way, the lodge I was at, which there's one in every town, I guarantee you, there's one in every town. The mine was literally in the basement of a church. So it really is like there aren't too many formal lodges anymore beyond grand lodges.
It is shrunk. Yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely shrunk in popularity, and it's now a lot of lodges are going through a cultural change that actually, this was a very interesting thing that I found out about why the alt-right even caught my interest. In Masonry, a lot of people are going back to, I think it's called something like the Continental style or a Continental Lodge or European Lodge, where they use candles. And everybody's in suits. It's a lot more somber. The colors are darker. It's just not as modern looking. It looks old fashioned. And I found that very interesting. That's they want something old and traditional again. And I was like, okay, huh.
Yeah, and that's honestly, dude, this is probably one of the best conversations I've ever had with you. But let's watch this video.
Yeah, totally.
Oh boy, Italy! What happened to World War II?
Former glory from 2,000 years ago. When the fascists took over the country back in the 1920s, Their leader, Benito Mussolini, promised the people of Italy that he would reclaim that glory the Italians once had. To most of Europe, Italy was a joke. Ever since its reunification, it has had a pretty poor military record. Wars in Africa ended horribly, and their colonial ambitions were minuscule compared to Britain and France. Mussolini dreamed of finally giving Italy that respect back. His hopes were that someday the Italians would dominate the Mediterranean world in a neo-Roman Empire. As we all know, that didn't happen at all. They got bogged down in every invasion they tried. Greece, North Africa, you get the point. What I'm imagining is, what if Mussolini's dream had come true? Say the Axis powers win, and Italy annexes all the land they want to make their neo-Roman Empire dream come true. In this alternate timeline, it's pretty necessary for the Axis powers to win World War II. How do they do this? That's not very important. I've already done some videos about that. To make up for ignoring the Italians in those videos, let's imagine what this Axis victory would look like from an Italian perspective. Congratulations, Mussolini, you won the war. You can now annex any nations you want. If Italy's plans had been realized, it would have been comparable to the size and scale of the old Roman Empire. But, sorry to burst your bubble, Linguini, just because you win the war, it doesn't mean you could have had the power of Rome. Why do I say this? During the war, most of the conflicts Italy fought in, Germany had to back them up. Which there actually is one thing this neo-Rome shares with the old one, the Germans. It's a common misconception that just because Germany and Italy were both in the Axis powers, that they shared similar beliefs and got along fine. They in no way were friends. In fact, they really hated each other. Hitler was vocal about how he saw the Italians as a lazy, useless people. Terrible military performance as an excuse.
Hitler, why you do this to me?
Totally. Hey, why are you talking about me like this?
You in front of my wife and my daughter. What the fuck, motherfucker? Fuck you! I give you no spaghetti. Get out! Get out!
I know. I'm totally thinking of all these things. Like get out of my fucking restaurant. You get the fuck out of here.
To show how weak of a race they were. But Cody, you say, prints as Italians as a lazy, useless people. He used their terrible military performance as an excuse to show how weak of a race they were. But Cody, you say, I thought Italians were European and white. That's right, Jimmy. But you see, for the Nazis, they organized whites themselves into subraces. At the top were the Aryans, and at the bottom were the darker-skinned Mediterraneans. This wasn't a secret the Germans kept either. They made it very well known to their Italian allies that their race was inferior. No matter how much Mussolini insisted
Can I join you now?
Hitler to change their mind.
9.
Well, if the Axis powers won the war, this racial tension between the two doesn't go away. It becomes a legitimate concern for this neo-Roman Empire, which shares borders with the now strongest military force in the world. In peacetime, powers are dissolved. Since Italy doesn't have an efficient military, this large nation is plagued by constant native revolts in the North African colonies. With Germany having the upper hand, Italy's entire fate is determined by whether Hitler wishes to do something against the Italians. Whether this would happen, maybe, maybe not. It's kind of impossible to say. What is known is that the neo-Roman Empire would be weak and unstable, constantly at fear that its northern neighbor might bully them, or worse, destroy them entirely if need be. Sorry, Spaghetti.
Apologize to any Italians offended. Don't call your food funny names next time.
This video was sponsored by World of Tanks War Stories.
Oh man, I gotta admit that was fun to watch.
Yeah, perfect. That was perfect for the wind up. Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta ask though. Do you think maybe the reason why Mussolini lost is because I never really heard much about Italian technology being very good when it came to military arms, and their navy was pretty normal, pretty normie, even less. I think one of the big problems is that Italy's leader Mussolini was determined by anger about the way the communists treated the veterans to reclaim the glory of the Roman Empire, but he really didn't think about why is it that Italy is weak.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that fundamentally, when it came to the whole expansion thing, that really, honestly, this is the thing I think about when people are they talk about, oh, the fascism and the businessmen and the corporations and the fascism, is I'm like, you guys don't really get, if corporatists were to run something with utter efficiency and it was super fascistic, it would be nightmarishly beautiful and deadly. There would be like these cities that would be built in the middle of nowhere. That was just the place where you refueled the robots that carried all of your awesome goods. And if you got too close to this city and you didn't have the right identification, a robot would do something horrible to you. So no one would fuck with it, and it wouldn't fuck with anybody because it would be so efficient. And people don't get, like, no, these empires that were bristling with cannon were socialist, so they were totally inefficient. Their ideas were crazy about expansion, and it was like, why did you? And everybody asks the question in there at some point, well, why did they just sort of think, maybe I'll just stop like right here for now, and just kind of settle in, get all the, we took over Poland. Let's just get them used to it, like Italy. How about not only do we take over Ethiopia, but we take over the entire motherfucking north of Africa, guys? Yeah, and you're just sitting there thinking, who was at that meeting? Like who's there thinking, oh yeah, we're gonna pull this one off. Yeah, this makes hella sense, dude. I don't know.
Well, I mean, they were thinking with their emotions, not really with their brains. And like Mussolini wanted glory. He's like, he was infatuated with glory. But the problem is, he never got out of that mindset and thought to himself, okay, these guns suck. They're not going to work. Oh, our Navy is really, meh. Oh, okay, so a lot of the men have now learned how to fight hand to hand and how to shoot straight. Okay, so here's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to be practical. It might take a few months to get everyone trained up. We might need to redo some of our roads. We might need to upgrade some of our technology. It's like, glory, glory, glory. I cannot wait to invade North Africa. Oh, maybe I take more than North Africa. Maybe I even take more than Germany. Oh, shh, don't get Hitler.
I know, yeah. I got to admit, it's one of those things that I think about every so often. I'm like, I really have to read much more up on that era of time, because it's one of those things, like, I'm like, okay, I'm almost there in a lot of the history that I'm reading, that I'm like, that, because World War II is just such, World War I and World War II are just such big thing. It's just so big to start chewing on. But hey, I'll let you get to sleep. I'm gonna start actually cleaning the dishes and all that, and then and start getting on.
All right, man. Have a good night.
Have a good evening.
Okay, but before you go, one more thing.
Hitler, why you do this to me? Come on, get out of my restaurant. Why you do this to me?
See you, man.
Night.